Welcome to Buddha Bedtime Stories. You've arrived at a quiet place where ancient wisdom meets gentle rest. Tonight, we begin another journey together, a journey inward. You'll uncover timeless knowledge passed down by enlightened masters, teachings used for generations to calm the restless mind and invite deep, healing peace. Feel free to share what time it is and where in the world you're listening from. You're part of something much larger, a quiet circle of seekers across time and space. In this session, I'll be sharing a hand-picked collection of Zen stories. These are not ordinary tales. They carry the preserved insights of awakened teachers who understood something most of us have forgotten. That peace is not found by changing the world around us, but by changing the way we see it. As Lao Tzu once said, at the center of your being, you have the answer. You know who you are, and you know what you want. As you listen, you may notice something gentle begin to shift. The grip of worry begins to soften. The endless noise of overthinking begins to fade, and in its place, a calm, quiet presence begins to rise. Let yourself settle in now. Let the weight of the day melt away. Take one slow, deep breath with me, and as you exhale, know that the teachings you are about to receive have been waiting for you, patiently across centuries. Welcome, friend, let's begin. In the days when animals still spoke the language of the wind and trees, there lived a turtle in a wide, sparkling pond near the edge of a small village. The water was clean, the lilies bloomed, dragonflies shimmered like tiny blades of light, and frogs sang in harmony beneath the moon. And in the center of it all, floating lazily on a flat, sun-warmed rock, was a turtle with a sharp mind and a sharper tongue. He was clever, observant, wise even, but he had one weakness. He could not stop talking. This turtle, who in a past life had been the Buddha, spent his days offering advice to fish, telling stories to tadpoles, and correcting the herons who perched too long on the reeds. He spoke of the stars, of the weather, of the foolishness of men and the arrogance of birds. And many listened at first. But over time, some began to swim a little farther from his rock. The frogs coughed politely and leapt away. Even the dragonflies found quieter lily pads to rest on. Still, the turtle spoke. He spoke when no one was near. He spoke when others slept. He spoke not to be heard, but because silence felt like drowning. One summer, the rains did not come. The sky cracked but gave no water. The pond shrank. Lilies withered. The fish moved deeper, their numbers fewer each day. 2 wild geese, passing overhead, noticed the shrinking pond and circled down. They landed beside the turtle and dipped their beaks in the muddy shallows. "This place won't last much longer," one said. "Soon it will be dry." The other nodded. "We should help whoever we can." The turtle, curious, swam closer. "Help? How?" The first goose blinked. "We will carry the small fish to deeper waters, and if you like, we can carry you too." The turtle's eyes widened. "You would do that?" "Of course," said the second goose, "but only if you can stay silent." "Silent?" the turtle echoed. "Yes," said the first. "We will hold a stick between our beaks. You must bite down on the center and hold on. But if you speak, Even one word, you'll fall." The turtle hesitated. Not talk? For an entire journey? He looked around. The pond was shrinking. His friends were gone. The mud cracked beneath the sun. He took a breath. "Very well," he said. "I will be silent." The next morning, the geese returned with a sturdy stick. They each gripped one end in their beaks. The turtle bit down on the center with determination. Together, they rose into the sky, wings strong, the turtle dangling like a pendant between them. He had never seen the world like this before. Forests stretched like ocean waves. Rivers wound like silver ropes. Hills rolled beneath them like sleeping beasts. And far below, people looked up and pointed. "Look!" a child cried. "A flying turtle!" Laughter rippled through the village. A man shaded his eyes. "What a strange sight! A turtle who thinks he's a bird." They laughed louder. They clapped and jeered. The turtle heard every word. His mouth tightened on the stick. He thought of clever comebacks, of biting remarks, of lessons he could teach these fools from above. And then he couldn't help himself. "I'll show you who's foolish." But the moment his mouth opened, he fell. Down, down through the sky, tumbling through wind and silence and regret until he struck the earth and never rose again. The geese circled once, then flew on. And below, the villagers stood in stunned silence beside the broken shell of the creature who could not stay silent. Later, when this tale reached the forest monasteries, a monk asked the Buddha, "Was the turtle's mistake pride?" "No," said the Buddha, "it was attachment. Not to his body, but to his voice, to the belief that every thought must be shared." He looked at the monk kindly. "There is wisdom in knowing when to speak, but greater wisdom in knowing when not to." And so, the story of the turtle who couldn't stop talking passed from village to village. Not as mockery, but as reminder that words are like seeds. They grow even when we forget we've planted them, and some, if spoken at the wrong time, can fall like stones. Because restraint is not weakness. It is strength disguised as silence. And sometimes, silence is the loudest wisdom of all. A small boat drifted across the open sea. The waves rocked it gently. Clouds moved slowly above. Seabirds called from afar, but there was no land in sight. In the boat sat a lone traveller, bowl in lap, robes soft with salt air. He watched the sky reflect on the water and whispered the phrase he'd heard 100 times but never understood. "Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form." These words come from the Heart Sutra, one of the most revered texts in Mahayana Buddhism. They are short, sharp, mysterious. They have been chanted in temples for centuries, painted on scrolls, whispered by monks, recited by dying lips. But what do they mean? How can something be both form and emptiness? Is it a riddle, a paradox, or a doorway? The traveller had once believed emptiness meant nothingness, that it was cold, silent, void. He tried to detach, to erase, to disappear. But the more he tried, the heavier he felt, because he still existed, still felt grief, still saw suffering in others and in himself. So he came to the ocean, not to escape, but to sit inside the question. The waves rose, fell. He dipped his fingers in the water. It clung for a moment, then slipped away. Form, emptiness. A wave is not separate from the sea. It rises, appears, shines in the light, then dissolves. But it was never apart. It never existed in the way we imagine. It was always just movement, a form born from formlessness, a shape that could never be held. This is the meaning of emptiness. Shunyata in Sanskrit. It does not mean nothing. It means no fixed, independent existence, no solid boundary between self and world. Everything is interbeing, dependent, arising together. Your body is form, but where does it begin? At the skin. What about the breath entering your lungs? What about the warmth from the sun on your cheek? What about the smile passed to you by a stranger? Where do you end and the world begin? The more you look, the more it all dissolves into ocean. Form is emptiness. Everything you see is temporary, transient, unstable. But then, the second line, emptiness is form. This is the beauty. Emptiness is not barren. It appears as everything. The flower, the teacup, the child's laugh, the pain in your chest. All are expressions of emptiness, not meaningless, but miraculous, because they are here. Briefly, shining like dew before it falls. The traveller looked around the boat. Wood planks, salt crust, a loose nail near the bow. All temporary, all destined to decay. And yet, each part of the boat held him above the water. Emptiness had taken form, and that form mattered. It kept him afloat. There is a story from a monastery. A student asked the master, "If all is emptiness, why do we sweep the floor?" The master said, "Because the dust is also empty." Then handed him the broom. Emptiness does not deny suffering. It does not say your pain is an illusion. It says this pain is real, but not permanent. It arises and passes, like a wave, like a thought, like every tear that ever fell. Emptiness does not diminish life. It makes life possible. When you understand this, not just with mind, but with breath, you begin to live differently. You don't grasp as tightly. You don't fear change quite so much. You begin to see others not as objects, but as fleeting, radiant moments, not mine, not enemy, just waves, each one precious. The traveller reached into the ocean and lifted a handful of water. It shimmered, slipped through his fingers, gone. But the sea remained, and he smiled. Commentary. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. It is not meant to be solved. It is meant to be felt, to be returned to again and again, like a bell that rings across the years. Each time you hear it, you understand a little more. You are not a solid thing. You are movement, memory, dust and starlight. You are shaped by your parents, your fears, your laughter, your kindness. You are not fixed, but you are real, not because you are permanent, but because you are here. Now, the boat on the ocean is your life. It will not last, but while it floats, it can carry you. It can carry others. It can move with the waves, not fight them. And when it sinks, because all boats do, the sea will still be there. And you will return to it, not lost, but home. The temple's library held thousands of texts, worn scrolls, faded sutras, ink-smudged commentaries written by hands long returned to dust. Monks came to read by daylight when the sun filtered through paper screens, and the scent of old parchment warmed the air. But one monk always came at night. Her name was May. She was quiet, thoughtful, the kind who listened longer than she spoke. Each evening, after her chores were done, she would carry a single candle into the library and read until wax melted low. One night during the rainy season, the wind howled across the hillside. Storm clouds swallowed the moon. Still, May entered the library, lit her candle, sat cross-legged before a scroll on emptiness. The flame flickered with every gust, but she kept reading. Outside, an owl perched in the eaves, white-feathered, wide-eyed. Still, it watched her, unblinking. As the wind swirled harder, the flame bent. Then, it went out. Darkness, total. May did not panic. She closed her eyes and waited. After a moment, she noticed a soft rustling overhead, feathers, then stillness again. She opened her eyes, and though she could see nothing, she sensed the owl was still there. Watching, she whispered aloud, "How do you see in this?" As if in answer, a line from the sutra she had just read returned to her. "The eye that sees true is not of flesh or flame, but of calm presence in the dark." She smiled softly. Perhaps the lesson wasn't in the candlelight, but in its absence. The next day, she spoke with the abbot. "Master," she asked, "why do we fear the dark so much?" He thought for a while. "Because we trust only what the eye can see. But true wisdom," he said, "often waits in the dark." He continued, "The owl does not light a lantern. It simply sees." From that night on, May still brought her candle, but she also learned to sit after it burned out, not to read, but to observe her breath, her thoughts, her discomfort. And slowly the dark became a teacher. Other monks noticed. May was calmer, slower to speak, gentler when correcting mistakes, as if she no longer needed light to know what mattered. One night, a novice joined her. He fidgeted, grumbled at the dark. "I can't see anything," he said. May smiled. "That's the beginning," she said, "not the problem." There's a Zen saying, "Don't curse the dark, don't worship the light, become the eye that sees in both." The owl never flew down, never made a sound, but its lesson stayed with May until the end of her days. Sometimes, the truest clarity isn't found by shining more light, but by learning to sit still when the candle goes out. As we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, let us turn to a tale about recognition and the true nature of worth. This is the next story. The forest path was dappled with golden light. Shafts of sun fell through the tall teak trees, casting long shadows that shifted with the breeze. A group of monks walked quietly, their feet bare on the earth, their minds turned inward. They had been traveling for 2 days now, through fields, across shallow rivers, under wide skies that watched without comment. And ahead of them, seated on a smooth, flat stone beside a trickling stream, was the Buddha. He was waiting, not impatiently, but as a mountain waits for the wind. The monks approached and bowed. Some sat, others stood, resting their walking sticks against the roots of a banyan tree. One among them, Ananda, had seen something on the road that troubled him. A farmer's son had been bitten by a snake. He had seen the child cry out, flailing in fear and pain. The boy's wound could be treated, but the panic, the despair that had settled in his eyes lingered in Ananda's heart. And so he asked, "Blessed One, why do some suffer more than others, even when the wound is the same?" The Buddha turned to him gently and answered with a story. "Imagine," he said, "a man walking through a quiet field. The day is calm, the air is warm, and then," he raised his hand, "an arrow strikes him." The monk stirred slightly. He gasps in pain. The wound is deep. The arrow has pierced his flesh. He clutches at it. This, Ananda, is the first arrow. He paused, but then the Buddha's voice softened, deepened. Then the man grows angry. "Why me?" he cries. "What have I done to deserve this?" He curses the heavens. He blames the gods. He weeps not only for the pain, but for the story of the pain. He looked slowly at the circle of listeners. "That is the second arrow." Some monks frowned slightly, as if trying to follow an invisible thread. "The first arrow," the Buddha said, "is the pain we cannot avoid. The body ages, illness comes, people leave us, we are wounded by life, by loss, by chance." He drew a line in the dirt with his finger. "But the second arrow is the one we shoot into ourselves." He tapped his chest lightly, with thought, with resistance, with fear, with story. Ananda nodded slowly. "So the suffering comes not only from what happens," he said, "but from how the mind meets it." The Buddha smiled. "Exactly." A young monk, Rahula, tilted his head. "But Lord, if a man is struck by an arrow, how can he not cry out? How can he not fear the pain?" The Buddha's gaze was kind. "He may cry out," he said, "but the wise man does not turn the cry into a prison." He looked at Rahula. "You may feel pain, but you do not have to become pain." The wind rustled through the leaves above them, as if nature itself exhaled in agreement. To feel sadness when a friend dies, that is the first arrow. But to say, "I will never be whole again," or "I should have done more," that is the second. He pointed to the stream beside them. "Water flows. It does not cling to a shape. When pain arises, let it arise. See it, feel it, but do not wrap your identity around it." An older monk, who had once been a warrior, bowed his head. "I have carried many arrows in my life," he said softly. "Not in the flesh, but in memory." The Buddha nodded. "The past is full of arrows we keep alive with thought. The future is full of arrows we imagine before they are even shot." He looked toward the trees. "But the present holds only the first arrow, and even that, when seen clearly, passes." A silence followed, the kind of silence that isn't empty, but full. The Buddha let it linger. Then He spoke again. You are not wrong to feel pain. You are not less awakened because you grieve or ache or tremble. He gestured to his own chest. This body too has known hunger, illness, sorrow. He placed his hand upon the ground. But when pain comes, I do not build a house around it. I do not say, this is me, this is mine, this is forever. He looked at each monk now, one by one. To awaken is not to avoid arrows. It is to stop shooting the second. Later that evening, as the monks prepared camp near a circle of moss-covered stones, a fire crackled quietly in their midst. Ananda sat with Rahula and the older warrior monk. They said little, but their silence was different now. Not numb, not avoidant, just aware. Rahula watched a moth flutter near the flame and whispered, "Even the fire burns only what touches it." Ananda smiled. The old monk closed his eyes. And in that moment, the Buddha's words drifted across the darkness like a breeze through tall grass. The first arrow belongs to the world. The second belongs to you. You can choose to set it down. In time, the teaching of the two arrows would find its way into distant lands, distant minds, translated, adapted, retold. Some would call it psychology. Others would call it mindfulness. Some would not give it a name at all. But beneath every version, the truth would remain. Pain is part of life, but suffering is what we build atop it. A story, a wall, a self. But when we learn to pause, to see the first arrow for what it is, and let go of the second dash, then peace returns, quietly, naturally, like a wound that knows how to heal. It was still dark when the monk lit the kitchen fire. Outside, the mountain air clung to the stones like breath not yet exhaled. Frost kissed the corners of the monastery walls, and the wind had not yet stirred the bell. But inside, the kitchen was alive. The tenzo, the head cook, moved with quiet care. He chopped vegetables with reverence, washed rice as though touching the Dharma, boiled water like preparing an offering to the unseen. Not because guests were coming, not because someone was watching, but because every movement was practice. In Zen monasteries, the tenzo is not just a cook. He is a teacher, a practitioner, a guardian of presence. His role is not low, it is sacred, because Zen does not draw lines between spiritual and ordinary. It dissolves them, and what remains is just this moment. And this moment includes rice. The great Zen master Dogen once wrote a full text on this, instructions for the tenzo. He said, "Do not treat cooking lightly. When you cook rice, wash your mind. When you slice roots, cut away delusion." He had learned this lesson young. When Dogen first arrived in China seeking true Dharma, he met an elderly tenzo in a seaside monastery. The man was in his 60s, sun-worn, with sleeves rolled and hands deep in soaking beans. Dogen bowed respectfully. "Venerable one," he said, "why do you, at your age and rank, work in the kitchen?" The old monk looked up and said, "If not me, then who? And if not now, then when?" Dogen offered to help. The tenzo smiled. "Thank you," he said, "but this is my practice." Later that day, Dogen saw the same monk drying mushrooms in the sun. He asked, "Why not do this tomorrow? The sun will rise again." The Tenzo simply said, "I do not wait for tomorrow, son. My life is today." And in that moment, Dogen understood something deeper than scripture. That enlightenment is not found apart from daily life, but within it, in the steam rising from a pot, in the rhythm of chopping, in the patience of stirring porridge without haste. Years later, as a master, Dogen taught his students, when you cook, just cook. Don't think, I am cooking. Don't think, this is just food. Don't think, this is not meditation. Make every motion the expression of the way. In the monastery, the Tenzo bows before entering the kitchen. He arranges the knives, washes the board. He does not multitask. He does not rush. When he stirs everything. When he scrubs the pot, he scrubs the self. There is no low task, only low awareness. There is a koan that asks, "What is Buddha?" One master answered, 3 pounds of flax. Another said, the rice cake on the shelf. Because Zen knows, the sacred hides in plain sight. Not above us, not beyond us, but within the ordinary, when seen without distraction. In modern life, we resist this. We see chores as interruptions, dishes as delays, errands as obstacles to real practice. But Zen asks, what if the very thing you're avoiding is your path? What if folding laundry is a bow? What if sweeping the floor is a blessing? What if cleaning the toilet is a teaching and letting go? The Tenzo is not trying to finish cooking. He is inhabiting it. With full presence, with full breath, with no need for applause, because practice is not what we do on the cushion, it is how we live off it. Dogen wrote, "See with your ears, hear with your eyes, prepare the food with your whole body-mind." Not poetry, not metaphor, instruction to become so present that the boundaries dissolve. To listen to the rice as it boils, to feel the carrot before slicing, to bow to the ladle before lifting it. Because when we fully meet a moment, there is no self left to be enlightened. Only the moment, only the rice, only the breath. Once, a student complained, "Master, I have no time for meditation. I spend all day in the kitchen." The master asked, "Do you wash the rice?" "Yes." "Do you chop the greens?" "Yes." "Then why do you call that not meditating?" Commentary. Zen dismantles the hierarchy between sacred and mundane. It reminds us, you don't need incense to wake up. You don't need chants to be present. You need rice and a spoon, and the willingness to give yourself to both without resistance. If you're waiting for your life to get quieter before you practice, you may wait forever. But if you meet this moment, this task, as the way itself, then even the laundry becomes a sutra. Even the shopping list becomes a mantra. Even the broom becomes your teacher. The Tenzo is not just feeding bodies, he is cooking truth. And when the pot is washed, the ladle hung, and the kitchen swept, there is nothing left to attain, because it was never somewhere else. It was always here. In the steam, in the stillness, in the rhythm of this one breath. In the heart of the city of Vaishali, not far from the clamour of markets and the perfume of jasmine, there lived a man unlike any other. He was wealthy, yes. His robes dyed in saffron and silk. His estate wide as a lake. He was respected, known to governors and scholars alike. He was a householder, a father, a merchant. But more than that, he was awake. His name was Vimalakirti. Unlike the monks, he did not wear simple robes. Unlike the ascetics, he did not live in the forest. He lived in the world, but not of it. He walked through noise with the silent mind. He moved through illusion without being caught. And so his teachings were sharper than sermons, his presence more disruptive than thunder. One day, it was said that Vimalakirti had fallen ill, not from weakness, but from compassion. He had taken on the sickness of the world so others might awaken. Word reached the Buddha and his disciples, so the Buddha asked, "Who will go and visit the ailing Vimalakirti?" One by one, the great disciples declined. Shariputra, Maudgalyayana, Ananda. Each said, "Master, I cannot. I have debated Vimalakirti before, and I was humbled." Because this layman, this non-monk, non-official, had a clarity that even the great arhats could not match. His words undid your logic. His questions pierced through pride. He was kind, but unshakably sharp. At last the Buddha turned to Manjushri, the bodhisattva of wisdom, and Manjushri, without hesitation, said, "I will go." So Manjushri entered the city, accompanied by heavenly beings, monks, and devas. He found Vimalakirti reclining on a simple bed beneath a flowering tree. His eyes were calm, his illness invisible, his presence unmistakable. Manjushri bowed. "Venerable one," he said, "how should a bodhisattva view the world?" A simple question. And Vimalakirti answered not with poetry, but with paradox. A bodhisattva views the world as a magician views an illusion, as a dream, as a mirage, as a bubble on water. Manjushri asked again, "What is the root of this illness?" Vimalakirti replied, "The root of my sickness is the sickness of all beings. When they are healed, I will be healed too." And then he began to teach, not with lectures, but with reversals. He said a bodhisattva must live in the world without being trapped by it, must speak without attachment to words, must enter duality in order to transcend it. His home became a Dharma hall, his bed a throne of emptiness. Then came the final deepest question. Manjushri asked, "What is the ultimate teaching of non-duality?" One by one, the assembled bodhisattvas gave answers, each profound, each poetic. They spoke of emptiness, of no birth and no death, of neither here nor there, of neither self nor other. Each spoke in turn, until all had spoken. Then they turned to Vimalakirti and asked, "What is your answer?" Vimalakirti looked at them, smiled, and said, "Nothing." He remained completely silent. No gesture, no word, just presence. And in that moment, the hall fell still. Even the wind paused at the edge of the window. And the bodhisattvas understood, because that, his silence, was the answer. Beyond yes and no, beyond concepts, beyond even the word beyond. Only direct knowing, unspoken and complete. Commentary. The Vimalakirti Sutra is not just a scripture, it is a mirror, held up to the part of us that clings to roles, to robes, to rank, to rhetoric. It reminds us, wisdom is not a matter of appearance, and truth is not always spoken. Vimalakirti was not a monk, but he understood Dharma more deeply than most. He owned property, but was not owned by it. He lived among crowds, but dwelled in emptiness. He used language, but was not trapped by it. And when the time came to speak of non-duality, he let silence do the speaking. Sometimes, silence is escape. But sometimes, it is clarity, not a refusal, but a revelation. A silence so full, it says everything. There's a Zen saying, when the mouth is closed, the Dharma speaks most clearly. This is what Vimalakirti embodied, the wordless transmission, the truth beyond fingers pointing to moons. In our world, we often rush to speak, to fill the space, to define, to prove. But Vimalakirti teaches, when we stop grasping, when we stop arranging words like armor, what remains is presence. The silence was not empty, it was alive. It was not passive, it was the roar of no self. It dismantled even the idea of someone giving an answer, and left only this. You don't have to be a monk to wake up. You don't have to renounce your life. You have to see through it, and then live with depth, with clarity, with compassion, from within the illusion, while no longer fooled by it. Vimalakirti's room is still here. Every moment you stop trying to win the argument, every time you stop needing to prove you're wise, every time you rest in the space before thought, you are sitting beside him, and you are silent too. The novice stepped forward, eyes low, robes gathered neatly in his arms. He had heard whispers of the great master Joshu, of his clarity, of his presence, of the way his words, brief, sharp, could undo years of illusion in a single moment. And so, the novice came with a question, simple, ancient, and burning. He bowed deeply. Does a dog have Buddha nature? Joshu looked at him, quiet as a still pond, then said, Moo. Just that. One word, Moo. The novice blinked. He had expected a teaching, a parable, perhaps even a sermon on interdependence or karma. But all he got was this one syllable, Moo. Number not no, as in rejection, but Moo, as in as in empty, as in beyond yes or no. The novice opened his mouth to speak again, to clarify, to plead for context. But Joshu had already returned to trimming the bonsai. And the novice was left standing there, holding a question that would not let go. Does a dog have Buddha nature? In the Mahayana tradition, the answer is yes. All beings have Buddha nature, even the smallest ant, even the vilest criminal, even the barking dog on the dusty street. The Heart Sutra says, form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. So why did Joshu say Moo? It wasn't to contradict the sutras, it was to shock the mind out of seeking answers like stones in a riverbed. For weeks, the novice could not sleep. He replayed the moment again and again. He wrote MU in his journal. He whispered it during walking meditation. He shouted it into the wind. He carried it like a thorn in the foot, every step made sharper by its presence. One night, a senior monk approached him in the meditation hall. "Why do you look so troubled?" he asked. The novice bowed his head. "Master Joshu gave me a koan. Does a dog have Buddha nature?" he said. Mu! I don't understand. The monk smiled gently. You won't. Not yet. The novice frowned. Then what should I do? Burn your logic, said the monk, and sit. In the centuries that followed, Joshu's Mu became the first koan in the Gateless Gate, a collection of paradoxical encounters meant to tear open the mind. And it is said that some monks meditated on Mu for 5 years, 10, even 20. Not because the question was hard, but because the answer required the death of the one asking it. Mu is not a word, it is a doorway, but it has no latch, no hinges, no frame. Only a gate that exists because the mind insists there must be one. And the moment you stop trying to walk through it, it disappears. The novice became obsessed. He stopped eating. He stopped speaking. He carried Mu through every moment like a fever dream. He touched it while pouring tea. He chewed it like rice. He sat with it in the dark until the wind outside sounded like it was chanting back to him. M, m, m. He began to tremble. And still, no clarity, no breakthrough, only silence. One dawn, after 300 days of silent retreat, he broke. He stood in the rain, lifted his head to the grey sky, and shouted, "What is Mu?" The sound echoed against the temple walls. A bird fluttered. A branch creaked, but nothing answered. He fell to his knees, not in defeat, in surrender, not to ignorance, but to not knowing. And in that moment, he let go, not just of the question, but of the one who needed the answer. And that's when it happened. Not a flash, not a thunderclap, just a quiet shift, a falling away, and everything returned. The wind, the breath, the feeling of water on his skin, the sound of a dog barking in the distance. Nothing extraordinary, and yet everything was different. He stood, he laughed, he bowed. Later, when the novice returned to Joshu, the master asked no questions. He looked once in the monk's eyes and simply said, "Good." Nothing more, because no explanation was needed. You cannot explain Mu, you can only become it. Commentary. In Western terms, we often ask, is it this or that? Zen asks, who is asking? Joshu's Mu is not a negation of the dog's Buddha nature. It is a negation of the very framework of the question. To ask, does a dog have Buddha nature, is to separate Buddha nature from dog, to assume that it's something a being might possess. But Buddha nature is not a possession. It is not a label. It is the breath before thought, the space before division. Mu is the erasure of the chalkboard before the question is even written. Zen does not want you to answer the question. It wants the question to consume you, until there's nothing left, until only presence remains, until even Mu is forgotten. And the wind in the pines is enough. The gateless gate is open to all. But to pass through, you must stop trying to pass. You must stop searching for the latch. There is no Mu outside yourself. It is not in the words of sutras, not in the mind's debate. It is here, now, when all seeking stops and the moment is allowed to be, just as it is. Even a barking dog, even your own confusion, even the silence after reading this sentence. As we move deeper into the quiet teachings of Zen, we come to a story about seeing clearly and understanding true value. Listen carefully to the next story. It started like any other Monday. The inbox blinked with urgency. 142 unread. A blinking red light on the office phone. Calendar blocks stacked like bricks. Slack notifications multiplying like rabbits in spring. Julian sipped lukewarm coffee and took a deep breath. Then he dove in. He was efficient, smart, reliable, they called him. Always responsive. Always ready. Always tired. Somewhere between the 7th reply and the 4th Zoom call, he noticed his chest tightening. Nothing sharp, just a quiet constriction. A warning, like a traffic light blinking yellow. But he kept going, because the world rewarded output. And silence. Silence didn't show up on KPIs. By 4 p.m., his eyes burned. By 6 p.m., he was still typing. He didn't hear the rain start, didn't notice the tea growing cold beside his keyboard, until a calendar reminder popped up. Meditation class, 6:30 p.m., room 4B. He had signed up weeks ago, half joking, a resolution maybe. He almost closed the tab, but something, maybe the silence behind the noise, nudged him. Room 4B was warm, soft lighting, folded cushions, a bell. Only 6 people sat in the circle. A woman at the front, maybe late 40s, calm-eyed, greeted him with a nod, not words. "Sit however you like," she said. Julian sat stiffly, still in his button-up, still full of digital momentum. The teacher closed her eyes, spoke gently. "Let the inbox go. Let the to-do list drop its grip. Notice the breath, that's all." Julian's mind raced. The Henderson file, the Q4 budget, the message he forgot to reply to. But the bell rang again, soft and clear, like a sound not trying to impress anyone. And slowly, his thoughts became less sticky. After 20 minutes, she said, "Busy is not always bad, but sometimes it's a way of avoiding stillness. Ask yourself, what would I hear if I stopped pretending I didn't have time to listen?" Julian felt something twist. Not painfully, just honestly, because beneath the notifications and meetings and perfectly managed chaos was a quiet voice he hadn't heard in years. It didn't ask for much, just a pause, a breath, a life lived on purpose, not just performed. That night, he walked home in the rain. No umbrella, no rush. Each raindrop felt like punctuation in a sentence he had forgotten how to read. The next morning, his inbox was just as full, but he didn't open it right away. He brewed tea, sat for 5 minutes, watched the steam rise and disappear. And in those 5 minutes, he remembered he was alive, not just employed. Julian didn't quit his job, didn't move to the mountains. He still answered emails, still ran meetings. But once a day, he closed the laptop, turned off the noise, and let the silence speak. The Buddha never warned about email, but he did say, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." Sometimes peace is not found in responding faster. It's found in not responding at all, at least for a moment. One morning, as the temple bell echoed over the hills, a feather drifted across the gravel path. Software white, weightless. It twisted in the breeze, rising, falling, then gliding gently down near the feet of an old monk named Shiro. He stopped mid-step, not because the feather blocked his way, but because he had learned that even the smallest interruption might carry a lesson. He bent down, lifted it with 2 fingers, and held it up to the light. It was a simple thing, delicate, almost nothing, and yet it had travelled from some distant bird, perhaps one flying over the valley, or shaken loose in a morning preen. It had no wings, no voice, no will, yet here it was, resting, present, carried. That day during tea, Shiro spoke to the novices. He placed the feather on the center of the table. "Is this free?" he asked. The youngest tilted his head. "It floats on the wind, so..." "Yes?" Another frowned. "But it goes wherever the wind takes it. That's not freedom, it's powerlessness." A third sipped her tea and said nothing. Shiro smiled. "All 3 of you are correct," he said, "depending on how you define freedom." He continued, "Most people think freedom means control, to choose, to decide, to resist what moves us." He looked out the open window. "But the feather has no resistance, no plan, and yet it dances." The novices leaned in. He pointed toward the sky. "If the wind blew north, it went north. If the wind changed, so did the feather. But never once did it say, 'I failed.'" There was a pause. One novice finally asked, "Then what is the lesson, Master?" Shiro replied softly, "There are times to steer and times to yield." He picked up the feather again. True freedom is not always in direction, but in the way we ride the currents. Later that week, the temple cat fell ill. The novices fretted. One cried. Another tried to feed it broth. But Shiro simply sat beside it. He offered no solutions, no prayers, only presence. When the cat passed, Shiro gathered the novices. He did not speak of death, only of the wind. "You cannot hold the wind in your hands," he said, "but you can feel its path against your face." He paused. "And when it carries something away, you do not curse the air. You bow to its rhythm." The novices returned to their chores, softer now, quieter, less frantic in their attempts to fix what could not be fixed. One afternoon, as a storm gathered, a gust swept through the open courtyard. A lone feather rose from the steps, twirled, and vanished over the garden wall. Shiro saw it, smiled. He whispered, "Carried, yet free." There's a saying in Chan Buddhism: "The bird leaves no tracks in the sky. The wind leaves no footprints in the grass." The feather, like the mind, is most graceful when it stops fighting where it's going. It was the 5th night of the waxing moon. The air in Kapilavastu was still, not silent, but hushed, as though the stars had gathered at the edges of the world to listen. The palace walls breathed in jasmine and sandalwood. Lamps flickered gently. Servants whispered down the halls. And in the royal chamber, Queen Maya of the Shakya clan slept. Her breath moved softly. Her hands rested over her womb, though she did not yet know why. Outside, the moon hung high, full, radiant, unblinking. And beneath that silver light, a dream came to her. Not wild, not fevered, but clear, like water holding the shape of the moon, the dream. She found herself in a quiet grove. It was not the palace, and yet it felt familiar. There were trees, tall and old. Their trunks curved like dancers, their leaves whispering secrets from lifetimes ago. She stood barefoot, wrapped in white. No crown, no jewels, only peace. And above her, the moon glowed brighter than it ever had, a luminous pearl suspended in sky. Then the winds parted, and from the east he came. A white elephant, vast and radiant, walked across the clouds, 6 tusks curved like ivory moons. Each footstep landed without sound, as though the earth bowed beneath him. His eyes were gentle, his ears like lotus petals. His skin shimmered, not with brilliance, but with quiet power. He carried a white lotus in his trunk, and he came to her, not with force, not with haste, but with the serenity of one who knows where he is going. She did not step back. She did not fear. She simply stood and watched. And when he reached her, he bowed, as if to offer the lotus, as if to ask permission. She lowered her gaze, and in that moment, the elephant entered her side. There was no pain, only light, only warmth, as though the moon had moved into her body, as though the entire sky now rested inside her. And in that light, she saw a vision, a child, radiant, seated on a lotus, surrounded by devas and sages, stepping not into royalty, but into destiny. She saw the turning of wheels, the shifting of ages, the crumbling of illusion, and then the dream dissolved. Waking, Maya woke before the birds. The sun had not yet touched the mountains. The oil lamp beside her flickered once, then settled. The chamber was silent, but her hands, still resting over her abdomen, were warm. And her heart beat not with confusion, but with awe. She rose slowly, wrapping herself in soft cloth. She moved through the halls like moonlight and summoned her attendants. "I have seen something," she said. "Call the king, call the sages, call the dream readers and wise ones, bring the astrologers." And they came, with scrolls, with incense, with knowing eyes. She recounted every detail. The forest, the moon, the elephant, the lotus, the peace. They listened, they nodded. And at last, the eldest among them, a man with a voice like woven silk, spoke. "Your dream is not of the ordinary world. It is the sign of a great birth. The child in your womb is no ordinary prince. He will be a Chakravartin, a turner of the wheel. He will change the world. If he remains in the palace, he will become a king of kings. But if he sees the sorrows of the world, he will turn from gold to truth and become a Buddha." The king placed a hand upon her shoulder, not with doubt, but with wonder, because even he, strong, worldly, wise, felt something stirring, something vast, something that had no name yet. The months. As the days passed, the kingdom watched Queen Maya with quiet reverence. Wherever she walked, flowers bloomed slightly earlier. The air around her felt cooler, gentler. Children stopped crying as she passed. Strangers bowed, unsure why. She herself changed. She laughed more easily. She wept with the songs of birds. She dreamed of stars and rivers and ancient trees. She felt the child grow, not just within her body, but as if within the world itself. And one day, near the time of birth, she asked to travel to her ancestral home. It was the tradition of her people, but more than tradition, it was a quiet longing. The king arranged everything, silks and guards, chariots and attendants. But Maya moved simply. She chose only a few companions and rode through forests and open roads beneath a sky filled with soft clouds. The birth. They stopped at Lumbini, a grove of sal trees, green and peaceful. The sun filtered through the canopy. The wind carried the scent of blossoms. Birdsong drifted like prayer. Maya stepped down, drawn to the trees. She held a branch, looked upward, and in that moment, beneath the same moon she had seen in her dream, she gave birth. The child came easily, without struggle, without fear. He did not cry. He simply opened his eyes, wide and calm, and the legends say he took 7 steps, that lotus flowers bloomed beneath each foot, that he raised one hand to the sky and one to the earth and said, "I am born for the benefit of all beings." The attendants wept. The forest fell silent, and the trees, it is said, bowed ever so slightly toward the child. Maya held him to her chest, and though she had seen him in vision, this was different. This was not dream. This was real. The warmth of skin, the weight of life, the beginning of something vast and quiet and beautiful. After, she did not live long after the birth. Some say it was destiny. That one who gives birth to a Buddha must return to the heavens. That her role was complete. Others say she became a guiding spirit, watching over him from a celestial realm, offering protection in moments when the path turned dark. But her presence never vanished. The child, Siddhartha, would one day walk away from his palace, would one day sit beneath a tree and awaken, would one day teach the world how to end suffering. But it began here, with a dream, with a white elephant, with a moonlit vow whispered across the veil of sleep, and with a mother who said yes, because every journey begins before we can name it. Every great awakening begins in the quiet, and sometimes the first step toward truth is a dream. With each step on the Zen path, a new lesson unfolds. Now we turn to a story about recognition, of self, of others, and of what truly matters. Listen carefully to the next story. The tree stood at the edge of the world. Its roots gripped the earth like memory. Its branches reached toward the sky like longing, and beneath it sat a man, still as a mountain, breathing, watching, waiting. His name had once been Siddhartha, but that name now lay behind him, like a robe folded and left at the forest's edge. He had left palaces, left hunger, left both indulgence and denial. And now, with the moon rising above the horizon and the world softening into dusk, he sat beneath the Bodhi tree, not in search, but in surrender. His legs were crossed, his hands rested lightly in his lap. The breath moved through him like wind through reeds, slow, even, empty of grasping. He had made a vow, though my skin withers, though my bones turn to dust, I will not rise from this seat until I see clearly. until I find the end of suffering." And so the night began. The stars emerged like scattered seeds across the dark. The forest exhaled. Animals stirred. The air cooled. Siddhartha's mind turned inward, like a lamp flame drawing into itself. He began to see, not with eyes, but with knowing. Visions came, clear, unforced, as if someone were whispering his past to him, life by life. He saw himself born in countless forms, as man, as woman, as child, as beast, as merchant, as slave, as prince, as pauper, each life blooming and withering, each desire rising and fading, each birth followed by loss. He saw himself die 1,000 deaths, not with fear, but with clarity, and for the first time he understood. The self is not fixed. It moves, it changes, it clings, it returns. He watched the thread of his existence unspool across time, and yet something beyond the thread remained still. He did not speak, he did not stir, but inside him, a door creaked open, and he stepped through. Midnight deepened. The forest held its breath. The moon climbed higher, softening the world in silver. Now he turned his gaze outward, not with judgment, but with compassion. He saw the lives of others, their births and deaths, their joys and sorrows, rising and falling like waves. He saw kings and criminals, lovers and thieves, monks and warriors, all bound by the same law, karma, intentions like seeds, actions like water, and from them the fruits of joy or suffering. He saw that no life stood alone. Each was a thread in a vast net. Each thought, each choice, each word sent ripples outward, reaching far beyond the speaker, the thinker, the doer. He saw how hatred returned as hatred, how greed bore more hunger, how ignorance looped endlessly like a wheel spinning in sand. And he saw too how kindness softened sorrow, how generosity opened hearts, how truth, spoken gently, could shatter lifetimes of illusion. And still, he sat, breathing, watching. The net of becoming stretched before him, vast, intricate, impossible to escape. Unless one saw the threads for what they were, not chains, but illusions. He closed his eyes, and the world began to tremble. The deepest hour of night, not even owls cried now, not even leaves moved, and within him, the final door unlocked. He turned his mind to the cause of suffering. Why do we suffer? Why do we cling? Why do we fear? And the answer rose, not like thunder, but like morning, clear, simple, radiant. He saw it all in a single breath. Ignorance gives rise to craving. Craving gives rise to clinging. Clinging leads to becoming. Becoming to birth. Birth to sorrow, decay, and death. And so the wheel turns. Again and again. But he also saw how it could be stopped. Not with violence, not with denial, but with clarity. With the eightfold path. Like stepping stones across a great river. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. He saw that suffering was not a punishment, nor a curse, nor a mystery. It was a path, and paths could be walked, and walked until they ended, and as the final shadow lifted from his mind, as the first bird stirred in the distant branches. It happened, not a flash, not a voice, not a miracle, but a knowing, a deep, still knowing. He had awoken. The sun crested the hills, slow and golden. The mist curled like incense through the trees. And Siddhartha, now the Buddha, opened his eyes. He looked out over the world, not with desire, not with fear, but with compassion so vast it had no name. He saw children born into love and hunger. He saw soldiers sharpening swords. He saw merchants counting coins. He saw mothers weeping over small graves. And he wept, not with sadness, but with tenderness, because they were all still sleeping, not foolish, not broken, just dreaming. He had been asleep once too, and now he was awake. It is said that Mara, the Lord of Illusion, came one last time, not with armies, not with demons, but with a whisper. Now that you are free, he said, leave them behind. They will not understand. They will mock you. They will twist your words. They will forget. And the Buddha listened. He sat with that thought, the thought of peace in solitude, of disappearing into the forest, of vanishing beyond suffering alone. But then he saw a farmer rising to begin the day. He saw a child carrying water. He saw a girl humming a tune she did not know was ancient, and he knew they were not lost, just tired, just waiting, just needing someone to show them the way back to themselves. So he turned to Mara and said, "They will understand. Some will. Even one is enough." And Mara vanished. He stood slowly, the grass beneath him still wet with dew. His knees ached, but his heart did not. He took his bowl, his robe, his breath, and began to walk toward the village, toward the people, toward the long road of teaching. He would speak not of gods, nor of punishments, nor of sacred fire, but of suffering, and how to end it, of breath, and how to follow it, of kindness, and how to live it. And so the man who once left his son sleeping, who had starved beneath trees, who had faced demons and silence and the unraveling of self, walked down from the Bodhi tree. And the world, though it did not know it yet, had already begun to wake. Because one man had seen clearly, had sat still, had not run, and had touched the truth. And from that stillness, a path was born for all the world to walk. Long ago, in a kingdom ringed by mountains and temples, a mighty king ruled from a palace of stone and gold. He was feared by his enemies, praised by poets, and followed by thousands. His armies stretched across the land. His wealth filled entire chambers, and his commands echoed through cities like thunder. But still, he was restless. Victory brought no peace. Praise faded quickly. Even sleep, wrapped in silk and guarded by soldiers, felt hollow. And so one morning, while gazing out across his kingdom from a marble balcony, the king spoke aloud. "Who in this world is greater than I?" A servant, sweeping quietly nearby, paused. "There is one," he said softly, eyes downcast. The king turned sharply. "Who?" "A sage," said the servant. "He lives alone in the forest, wears no crown, owns no gold, but they say he holds more peace in his silence than all your generals in battle." The king laughed. "A beggar in the woods, greater than me." But something in the servant's voice lingered. And later that night, when the court had gone quiet, the king summoned his best horse and rode out alone, disguised in simple robes, his face shadowed by the hood of a traveller. He rode for 2 days, through thick jungle, across rivers, past farmers and monks and children who did not bow. Finally, at the edge of a still grove, he saw a small hut beneath a Bodhi tree, and outside it, seated cross-legged on a flat stone, was the sage. No guards, no roof over his head, no possessions, just stillness and eyes that did not flicker when the king approached. "You are the one they speak of?" the king asked. The sage nodded once. "I am one, of many." The king studied him. "You have no palace, no army, no throne, and yet people speak your name in reverence. Why?" The sage said nothing. The silence stretched, long enough for the king to feel his own voice echo. Finally, the sage opened his palm and motioned for the king to sit. The king hesitated, then obeyed. They sat together under the tree, as the wind moved gently through the leaves. No words, no commands, just presence. After a long while, the king said, "You are not afraid of me." "I see no king," said the sage, "only a man with questions." The king frowned. "I have conquered lands, broken enemies, shaped history. You think I have questions?" The sage met his eyes. "Then why are you here?" The king opened his mouth, closed it, and looked away. Because beneath the silk, beneath the crowns, beneath the noise, he had come not to test the sage, but to understand something he could not command. Finally, he asked, "Why do people follow you?" "I do not ask them to." "Then why do they listen?" The sage picked up a small stone from the earth, rolled it in his fingers. "They listen," he said, "because I have no need for them to." The king blinked. "I lead armies, command cities, hold power over life and death, but still I'm not content." The sage nodded. "Because you mistake fear for respect, obedience for love, wealth for worth." The king stiffened. "Are you saying I am not powerful?" "I am saying," the sage said gently, "that true power does not cling, it does not shout, it does not fear being forgotten." They sat again in silence. The wind stirred the sage's robe. The king looked down at his hands. "I have everything," he said, "but still I feel empty." The sage smiled. "Then you are ready." "Ready for what?" "To lead without needing to be above." That evening, the king returned to his palace. No fanfare, no declaration, but something had changed. He began to listen more, to speak less, to ask questions instead of giving orders. His advisors whispered about his visits to temples, his long walks alone, his sudden interest in sitting beneath trees without speaking. And when his generals asked, "Who taught you this?" he said simply, "A man with nothing, who showed me everything." Years later, when the sage passed into silence beneath the same Bodhi tree, the king declared a day of stillness across the land. No work, no speech, just listening. And in time, his own rule became a story of its own, not because he expanded borders, but because he stopped needing to, not because he gained more, but because he learned to let go. And the story of the king and the sage spread like the breeze that once moved through the forest leaves. A reminder that the crown is not the source of power, wisdom is, and the one who does not seek to rule is often the one most worthy to lead. As our exploration of Zen Buddhism deepens, let us listen to a story that reveals how true worth is often overlooked. Here starts the next story. In the still hush before dawn, the palace of Kapilavastu stirred with the soft rustle of silks and the distant rhythm of footfalls on marble. The world outside was already unfolding, but within the gilded walls where Prince Siddhartha lived, every petal was sheltered from the wind of suffering. No wrinkles marred the faces of the attendants. No cries of illness echoed through the halls. No one spoke of death. His father, King Suddhodana, had ensured that his son knew only ease, beauty, and delight. The astrologers had predicted that the young prince would become either a great king or a holy man who would renounce the world. Fearing the latter, the king built a world without shadows. Flowers were changed before they wilted. Servants were chosen for their youth and radiance. Pain was not allowed to show its face. But truth, like the sun, cannot be hidden forever, and yearning, like a seed buried deep, will reach for the light even through stone. On a day shaped like any other, Siddhartha requested to ride beyond the palace gates. He was 29, cloaked in fine fabric and surrounded by careful illusions. Yet something inside him whispered of incompleteness, like a bell struck in the distance that would not stop ringing. There was a tightness in his chest he could not name, a hollowness that no feast or dance could fill. The charioteer Channa guided the prince through the streets of the city. The morning was bright, the people beautiful, the air filled with jasmine. Musicians played in courtyards, children laughed in sunbeams, all seemed perfect. But then the illusion cracked. At the edge of a quiet street, they saw a man hunched and trembling. His hair was white, his back bowed by years. His skin sagged like parchment, and his hands clutched a stick. He moved slowly, as though the air itself had thickened around him. Siddhartha leaned forward. "Channa," he asked, "what is wrong with that man?" "That is old age, my lord," Channa replied. "It comes to all who live long. The body weakens, the bones bend, the senses dull. No one escapes it." The prince stared at the man as he passed, the way he paused to catch his breath, the way his eyes seemed clouded with time. Siddhartha's hands gripped the side of the chariot. "Will this come to me?" he asked. "Yes, my lord, to you, to me, to all." Siddhartha fell silent. The first veil had lifted. The garden he had lived in was not eternal. Beneath the fragrance was decay. Beneath the music was silence. The next day, restless and inwardly stirred, he asked to go again. And again the world revealed another layer. As they turned a corner, Siddhartha saw a man collapsed by the roadside. His face was contorted in pain, his skin grey and clammy. His limbs twisted unnaturally, and he coughed as if his lungs were full of fire. "And this?" Siddhartha asked. "This is sickness, my lord," Channa said gently. "It strikes without warning. It takes the strong and lays them low. There is no rank or title that shields against it." The prince watched as a woman tried to cool the man's brow, her eyes wide with helplessness. A child clung to her skirts. Siddhartha turned away, but the image would not leave him. How many in his palace had hidden such suffering behind closed doors? How much of the world had he not seen? On the third day, the air hung heavy with heat. A solemn hush drifted through the streets. Siddhartha and Channa followed the sound of quiet chanting and saw a procession winding through the alleys. Men carried a shrouded form on a wooden bier, garlands laid across it. Behind them, mourners walked with bowed heads, incense curling in the air. "Is he asleep?" the prince asked, though he already knew. "He is dead, my lord," Channa replied. "This is the fate of all who are born." The prince felt something deep within him fracture. He watched the faces of the mourners, their grief like a tide with no shore. The man on the bier would never speak again, never eat, never laugh. All that he was had ended. And this comes to everyone. Everyone, my lord. The rich, the poor, the wise, the foolish. Siddhartha did not speak on the way back. The chariot wheels hummed against the stone, but his thoughts made no sound. The world had split open. Beneath the silks, beneath the pleasures, there was something hollow, a truth too vast to ignore. He lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. His wife, Yasodhara, slept beside him. Their son, Rahula, breathed softly in the next room. And yet, peace evaded him. He saw the old man, the sick man, the corpse. He saw them behind every smile, beneath every ornament. He knew now that no palace could protect against time. No love could shield against loss. No beauty could outpace decay. And then, on the fourth day, they rode out once more. This time, they saw a man in saffron robes, walking barefoot along the path. His eyes were calm, his steps steady. He carried no gold, wore no jewelry. His face bore the lines of both suffering and peace. "Who is that?" Siddhartha asked. "A seeker, my lord," Channa said. "One who has renounced the world to find the path beyond birth and death. One who walks in search of freedom." Siddhartha watched him until he vanished into the distance. No guards flanked him, no luxuries trailed behind, and yet something about the man radiated a serenity deeper than anything Siddhartha had known. That night, the prince stood at the edge of his sleeping son's cradle, not daring to wake him. He touched the boy's soft cheek, his heart torn between two loves, the love of his family and the love of truth. He stepped into the garden one last time, its scent bittersweet. He bowed before the moonlit statue of his ancestors, and with each step toward the gate, he shed a piece of his former self, his earrings, his sword, his silks. He left that night, into the forest, into silence, into the unknown. The four sights had shattered his illusion, but they had also opened the gate. And on the other side of that gate was the beginning of a path. The path that would change the world. In a small temple nestled between pine trees and fog, there burned a single candle. It was placed each morning in the center of the meditation hall. No glass shield, no tall holder. Just a quiet flame in a shallow dish. It flickered gently as monks came and went. It was not large, not dazzling, but it was always there. Software steady, alive. One morning, a gust of wind swept through the open window. The flame bent low. danced wildly, then steadied, then bent again. A novice sitting nearby grew anxious. He reached to close the window, but the old teacher touched his arm and whispered, "Wait, let it breathe." The flame, though small, did not go out. It fluttered, dimmed, but held on. The room stayed still, and after a few moments the wind passed. The candle straightened, its glow calm once more. The teacher turned to the novice and said, "This is your mind. This is your breath. This is your life." A candle by nature is vulnerable. One sharp breath, and it's gone. One careless movement, and it's lost. But that fragility is also its power, because the candle doesn't resist the wind. It doesn't fight to stay lit. It simply responds, bows, sways, returns. In Buddhism, the flame is often used as a metaphor for consciousness, flickering, ever-changing, not a solid thing, but a process, a dance between wick, wax, and air. Your thoughts are like the flame, your body, the wick, your breath, the air that sustains it, and the wind. That's life. The candle cannot control the wind, but it learns to dance with it. And that is the teaching. The novice asked, "But what if the flame goes out?" The teacher smiled. "Then we light it again, and again, and again. This is the practice. You will lose your calm. You will be shaken. Your light will dim, but the wick is still there. The wax remains. You are never without the capacity to be rekindled. There is a Tibetan saying, 'Better to light a single candle than to curse the darkness.' But even deeper is this. Learn to trust the candle even when the wind rises." In the days that followed, the novice watched the flame more closely. He began to notice how it moved, how it bent without fear, how it never clung to its shape from a moment before. And one morning, during Zazen, as a storm passed outside, he did not flinch. He simply watched the flame bend and return. And in that moment, something in him softened too. This is what meditation teaches, not how to still the wind, but how to let the flame bend without going out, how to meet life's changes with grace, how to stop fearing your own flicker. Grief is a wind, so is joy, so is anger, so is love. You cannot block the breeze without also losing the air you need to burn. You must stay open, even when it stings. Especially then, commentary. The candle and the wind is not a story about fragility alone. It's about resilience without resistance. It's about remaining warm, soft, and lit, even when the conditions shift. Even when nothing stays steady but your own willingness to begin again. We often think strength looks like staying the same. But sometimes strength is in swaying, in letting go, in trusting that the flame inside you is not so easily put out. You do not need to burn like a bonfire. You only need to glow enough to see your next step, to offer light to the person beside you, to remind the darkness, "I am still here." The teacher once said, "A candle gives all it has, and still the world is warmed by its passing. So be the candle. Even if your light flickers, even if no one sees, even if the wind blows harder tomorrow, burn anyway, not for show, but because this is who you are." The forest was silent. A slow dawn brushed the canopy with gold, and the earth exhaled the cool breath of night. Beneath the tall trees, a single figure sat unmoving, his presence vast, his stillness deeper than the roots below him. This was Samantabhadra, the bodhisattva of great action. Where Avalokiteshvara hears the cries of the world, Samantabhadra responds, not just with compassion, but with commitment, with vow, with doing. In Sanskrit, his name means universal worthy. He is the embodiment of enlightened action, not theoretical, but lived. In temples across East Asia, he is depicted riding a white elephant with 6 tusks, each representing one of the 6 paramitas, perfections of a bodhisattva: generosity, discipline, patience, vigor, meditation, wisdom. The elephant is steady, strong, humble. It does not race. It carries, because the path of action is not haste. It is devotion. Samantabhadra is not remembered for miracles. He is remembered for vows. In the Avatamsaka Sutra, a vision of infinite Buddhas and worlds, he stands before countless beings and declares, I vow to honor all Buddhas, to make offerings, to confess mistakes, to rejoice in goodness, to request teaching, to stay in the world, to follow the path, to live for others, to turn the wheel of Dharma, to dedicate all merit for the awakening of all beings. 10 vast vows, 10 immeasurable currents of action. And still, he made more, because Samantabhadra's compassion does not stop at feeling, it becomes form. There's a story told in the mountains of Sichuan. A wandering monk came to a temple where the image of Samantabhadra stood tall, ornate, golden, seated atop the elephant. The monk bowed, then whispered, Great Bodhisattva, what is your practice? And in his mind, a voice replied, Whatever brings benefit, I do it. The monk frowned. But how do I know what will help? The voice was soft. When your mind forgets the self, every step becomes service. This is the heart of Samantabhadra, not just knowing what is good, but doing it, even when tired, even when no one sees, even when the benefit is invisible. Some bodhisattvas sit in meditation, others speak sutras. Samantabhadra cleans the floor, carries the sick, plants trees he will never see grow, because his practice is not abstract. It is bodily, it is effort, and it is choice. In the West, we often associate wisdom with silence, stillness, detachment. But Mahayana Buddhism offers a different view, that wisdom and action are not separate, that the awakened mind moves, not compulsively, but naturally, like water down a mountain. Samantabhadra teaches, if you bow, bow completely. If you eat, eat with gratitude. If you work, work with your whole body. If you vow, live the vow. A novice once asked a Zen master, "What is the most advanced form of practice?" The master pointed to the broom, then to the rice pot, then to the novice's own worn sandals. "Whatever needs doing," he said, "do it completely." In this way, Samantabhadra is not lofty. He is practical. He does not ask you to fly. He asks you to stay grounded and keep going, to help even one being, to smile even once for someone who is suffering, to remember that in a single action, sweeping, bowing, cooking, there can be immeasurable merit when done with a mind of service. There's a teaching. A bodhisattva never asks, "Will this be noticed?" A bodhisattva asks, "Does this help?" In modern life, we are busy. We're taught to measure action by its results, but Samantabhadra teaches boundless action, where the result is not yours to keep, where the act itself is enough, where planting a seed you'll never see flower is not foolish, it is sacred. Commentary. Samantabhadra is not a figure on a pedestal. He is a mirror. He shows us that enlightenment is not an escape from the world. It is a return to it, fully awake, with sleeves rolled, with hands open, with vows not recited but lived. The white elephant is not fast, but it is strong. It does not seek applause. It just walks, one foot after the other, one act after the next, and the bodhisattva upon it smiles. Because every breath is part of the vow. To follow Samantabhadra is not to be perfect. It is to be willing, to step forward, to show up, to fall down and vow again. Because the path is long, but every step walked in service becomes joy. Continuing along the path of Zen insight, we pause now to hear a teaching about perception and hidden value. Listen carefully to the next story. A monk once traveled alone through a deep forest. He'd been walking for days, through mud, through heat, through cold rain. He carried nothing but a worn robe, a begging bowl, and a satchel with a single stone inside. Why the stone? He could not say, only that a teacher once gave it to him and said, "Carry this until you understand its weight." The monk took it literally, and dutifully he carried the stone. At first, it seemed like nothing, but as the months passed, over hills, across rivers, through deserts, it began to burden him. His back ached, his hands calloused, his mind grew resentful. "Why must I carry this?" he muttered one evening, dropping beside a creek. He looked at the stone, round, dark, unremarkable, a simple weight, and yet it had become everything. That night, he slept beneath the stars, and he dreamed. In the dream, he stood in an endless field beneath a vast open sky. He held the stone tightly, afraid to drop it, afraid he might lose something important. Then a voice, calm and distant, whispered, "Are you carrying the stone, or is the stone carrying you?" He awoke just before dawn, heart racing. The sky above him was pale and soft, wide and light. He looked at the stone again and understood. This is the story of thoughts, identity, and the illusion of burdens, how what we cling to becomes our weight. Commentary. Many of us carry stones, regret, shame, an old story someone once told us about who we are, a wound we've wrapped ourselves around for so long it feels like identity. We think we're being strong, but strength is not clinging. It's knowing when to let go. The monk carried the stone because he trusted his teacher. But trust without inquiry is like walking in darkness without asking if there's a door. His real practice began not when he received the stone, but when he questioned it. The Buddha taught that suffering arises from attachment, even to things that seem noble, tradition, memory, belief, self-image. We say, "This is who I am." But who is saying it? And what happens when the self no longer fits? The stone was not the problem. The gripping was the fear of what it meant to be without it. We carry pain from the past because we think dropping it means forgetting. We carry roles that no longer serve us because we think they are us. We carry anger because we think it protects us. But a clenched fist cannot hold the sky. Later that day, the monk stood on a hilltop and watched the clouds pass. He held the stone in both hands, not angrily, not resentfully, just with awareness, and then he set it gently on the ground, not thrown, not discarded, just returned. A breeze touched his robe. The clouds shifted. He took his next step, and it felt like the first. In that moment, he realized the sky had always been there, unbothered, unburdened, vast, and that somewhere along the way, he had confused being grounded with being weighed down. This is the nature of the mind. It can be like a stone, heavy, fixated, stuck in the past, or like the sky, open, vast, always able to hold the weather without becoming it. The monk never told others to drop their stones. He simply told this story and ended it with a question. What are you carrying that is carrying you? So, pause today. Look gently at the weight in your hands, your heart, your mind, and ask yourself, do I still need this to walk? Or have I mistaken the stone for my path? The lake shimmered like a mirror at dawn. Mist hovered just above the water, rising in soft spirals. On its banks, reeds bowed gently in the morning breeze, and lotus blossoms opened their pink faces to the sun. In the middle of the lake stood a small island, quiet, green and hidden from the world. And on this island, in a nest woven from reeds and grace, lived a bird unlike any other. He was a mallard, but not an ordinary one. His feathers were not grey or brown, but a deep, radiant gold. He glowed like a flame in flight, and his heart was as generous as his form was rare. He was the Buddha in one of his many past lives. Once, long ago, he had been a man, a kind and devoted father to 3 daughters. After his death, reborn as a golden bird, he remembered the love he had once held for his family. I cannot be their father again, he thought, but I can still care for them. So he flew across hills and rivers, forests and fields, until he reached the cottage where his daughters now lived, alone, in quiet poverty. He landed gently on the windowsill. When the eldest daughter saw the glowing bird, her eyes widened. The bird spoke, softly, from a heart still bound by love. I have come to help. Pluck one of my feathers and sell it. It will feed you for many days. The girl hesitated, but the bird bowed his head. It is freely given. She plucked a single feather, golden, smooth, and warm to the touch. And as the mallard took flight again, the room seemed to glow with a little more hope. Days passed, then weeks, and each time the daughters began to hunger, the bird returned, offering a single feather, no more. Their home grew brighter, their faces fuller. But the bird too remained bright, his feathers returning, his heart untroubled. Until one day, greed crept into the house like a shadow at dusk. The youngest daughter asked, "Why does he give only one at a time?" The middle daughter frowned. "He has many. If we plucked them all at once, we would be rich forever." The eldest hesitated. But he gives them freely from kindness. Kindness is slow, said the middle one. We need certainty. And so, one morning, when the golden mallard returned, the daughters did not greet him with bows or thanks. They seized him and plucked, not one, but all. The bird cried out, not in pain, but in sorrow. His wings weakened. His glow faded. The warmth in his eyes dulled like a dying flame. And when the daughters looked down, the feathers they held were no longer gold. Just grey, dull, ordinary, lifeless. As was the bird now lying still in their hands. They gasped. What happened? Where is the gold? But no answer came. The mallard lay motionless, too hurt to fly, too kind to curse, and the daughters, stunned and panicked, placed him back in the nest of reeds on the island, hoping he would heal. Weeks passed. The bird recovered. His feathers grew back, slowly, one by one. And though they shone again, he never returned to the cottage. He had given without condition, but greed had mistaken gift for possession, and in doing so, had severed the bond of love. In the forest beyond the lake, an old monk would later say, "A gift freely given must be received with humility. To snatch what is not offered is to lose more than gold. It is to wound the very heart that loves you." In time, the daughters came to understand their mistake, not because they lost their wealth, but because they lost his trust, and no coin can buy that back. The tale of the golden mallard spread from one village to another, told by firelight, whispered by parents to children, painted on temple walls in hues of radiant yellow, not as a warning against birds, but as a lesson about giving and taking. Because true generosity is not a stream to be dammed. It flows, it offers, but it must never be forced. And the purest gifts come not with conditions, but with open wings. In the quiet of a forest monastery, the Buddha once said to his disciples, "There is giving that seeks applause, and there is giving that seeks nothing. The first shines for a moment, the second for lifetimes." The baby arrived in the middle of the night. Wrapped in a tattered blanket, cheeks flushed with cold, it was placed on the doorstep of the small mountain temple. When the monk opened the door, he found only the child and a young couple trembling in the shadows. The girl clutched her shawl. Her eyes were swollen from crying. "This child is yours," she said. "You are the father." The monk, Hakuin Ikaku, did not argue. He did not protest. He did not explain. He only looked at the baby, then at the girl, and said softly, "Is that so?" In town, the scandal bloomed like wildfire. Hakuin, the respected monk, the teacher, the silent one, had seduced a local girl. People spat at the ground when they passed him. Merchants whispered behind their hands. Disciples left the temple in shame. Still, Hakuin said nothing. He carried water. He chopped wood. He fed the child with one hand and stirred rice with the other. Winter passed, then spring. The baby grew, laughed, cried, teethed on the corner of Hakuin's robe. And still, the townspeople looked on with judgment. And still Hakuin said nothing. Only that same phrase when asked, "Is that so?" A year passed. The girl returned, eyes lowered, voice trembling. She fell to her knees before Hakuin. "I lied," she said. "It was not you. I was afraid. I blamed you." The crowd had gathered now. Some gasped, some hung their heads. She wept and reached for the child. "I'm sorry. I came to take him home." And Hakuin? He held out the child gently and said, "Is that so?" This is one of the most beloved stories in Zen, not for its drama, but for its stillness, for the way Hakuin held the center, unmoved by praise or blame. He did not fight the accusation. He did not defend his name. He did not collapse under judgment. He simply met life as it came. In the West, we are taught to guard our reputations, to clarify, to prove, to explain. But Zen sees the self as a construct, a house of cards built from opinions, images, and roles. And so, Hakuin let his fall, willingly, without resistance. To many, this seems weak, unwise. But in truth, it takes immense strength to say, "Let them think what they will, I remain." Not in apathy, but in presence. Because the ego is loud, but truth is quiet. Hakuin's phrase, "Is that so?" is not sarcasm. It is not indifference. It is a bow to the unpredictability of life, to its mess, its reversals, its harshness and grace. It is the refusal to cling to any label, hero or villain, saint or sinner, right or wrong. There's a famous Zen saying, "Praise and blame are like the wind. To follow them is to be tossed about like a leaf. To stand firm is to become a tree." Hakuin was a tree, rooted, silent, alive. In private moments he may have wept. He may have watched the baby sleep and wondered why the world twists so easily. But his practice was clear. Do not grasp, do not reject, receive each moment, and respond not with reactivity, but with integrity. What would you do if someone lied about you? If the world turned against you? If your name became a weapon? Could you breathe? Could you hold the pain without making it your identity? Could you say, "Is that so?" and keep walking? There's another layer to this story. By taking the child in, Hakuin protected the girl. He absorbed her shame, held her fear, became her shield. Not out of guilt, but out of compassion. And when the truth came, he did not demand apology. He did not say, "I told you so." He returned the child like a leaf to the wind. Because Zen asks nothing of others, only this: be fully present and let go. Commentary. In the modern world, everyone is watching, commenting, interpreting, and we're trained to manage perception, to curate our story. But Hakuin reminds us, your life is not what others say. It is what you do when no one understands you, when you're misread, blamed, dismissed. That is where your practice begins. Hakuin did not defend his innocence, because truth does not need defense. It needs stillness. It needs the refusal to flinch. When asked later why he took the child in, Hakuin said, "Because the child needed care, and the girl needed mercy, and the temple needed the Dharma to be lived." No scripture, no debate, just rice, sleep, warmth, and the ability to say yes to life, even when it doesn't make sense. "Is that so?" is not an answer. It's an opening, a breath before reacting. A choice to not fight the river, but to float, eyes open, and maybe even smile. As we drift deeper into the still waters of Zen, a quiet teaching begins to rise, one that speaks of clarity and of value not always seen. Listen gently now. The next story begins. There was once a dog who barked at everything. Leaves in the wind. A child's laughter. The moon. He lived near the edge of a monastery in the countryside. A dusty patch of land behind the kitchen, where scraps were tossed and shadows flickered on old stone walls. The monks called him Naga. No one knew where he came from. He was just always there, tail curled, eyes sharp, teeth ready, and always barking. When visitors arrived, he barked. When bells rang, he barked. Even when nothing moved at all, he barked, as if the world itself was suspicious. Some monks avoided him. "Too wild," they muttered. Others threw him bread or whispered mantras for his restless soul. But one monk, elderly, slow-moving, soft-spoken, began to sit near him each morning. No words, no food, just presence. He would settle into the grass, cross-legged, a few paces from Naga's resting place. He didn't reach for him, didn't scold the barking. He just sat. At first, Naga barked at him too, low growls, sharp yelps, but the monk remained still, breathing in, breathing out, no threat, no fear, no reaction. Days passed, then weeks. Naga still barked at others, still snarled at passing carts or fluttering robes, but not at the old monk. Eventually, when the monk arrived, Naga would simply lift his head and then rest it again. One morning, the monk placed a small bowl of water nearby. Naga didn't touch it, not for an hour, but as the sun climbed, he finally approached, drank, then sat beside the bowl. The monk said nothing, only smiled. A younger monk watching from the corridor asked later, "Master, how did you calm him? We've tried so many things, food, scolding, chants." The old monk replied, "He barked because the world barked back. He expected resistance, but when he found none, he started listening." Reactivity, the monk would later teach, is like a match near dry grass. One spark, and the fire spreads. But if the grass is damp, soft, grounded, the flame fizzles out. Naga still barked sometimes, but not with the same edge, not with the same fear. And when the old monk passed away years later, Naga lay beside his meditation cushion for 3 days, silent, not whimpering, not barking, just there. Monks and novices alike noticed. A dog who once barked at everything, now holding space for grief, with the stillness of a cloud. There is a saying, when you stop reacting, you start seeing. The dog had seen the one thing no command could teach, that peace isn't taught through force, but through presence that does not flinch. The forest welcomed him, but not with comfort. It offered no shade from questions, no warmth from familiarity. Siddhartha had left behind the silk and gold of palace life, and now walked among wandering seekers, mendicants, and sages whose ribs showed like cages, and whose eyes glimmered with discipline or delusion. He sought teachers, and they welcomed him, for his mind was sharp, and his determination pure. He studied with Arada Kalama, who taught of the formless meditative realms, places where consciousness floated like light on still water. Siddhartha followed his teachings, and with silent breath and sharpened focus, he reached those planes. His mind became spacious. His thoughts slowed like clouds drifting across a still lake. For hours, even days, he remained in deep absorption, untouched by fear, untouched by want. But when he opened his eyes, he saw the truth. Though his body was still, suffering had not ended. The world remained the same. Hunger still visited the poor. Age still bent the backs of farmers. Death still came to children and kings alike. He bowed to Arada Kalama with gratitude and moved on. Next, he studied with Udaka Ramaputta, who taught of neither perception nor non-perception, of the vast nothingness that lay beyond all forms. Siddhartha once again followed, and again he reached the heights. He learned to let go of sensation, of even the thought of self. He floated, as if beyond the skin of the world. But again, when his eyes opened, the truth remained. Desire still lingered. Aging still came. Death still waited. He thanked his teachers, bowed with reverence, and walked on. He had reached the highest peaks of mind. He had sat in the palace of consciousness. And still, he had not seen freedom. In a grove beside the Niranjana river, he found a band of 5 ascetics who practiced fierce austerity. They believed that the body must be conquered by pain, that by starving it, punishing it, mastering its cravings, one could burn away desire and illusion. Siddhartha joined them. He ate but 1 grain of rice a day. He chewed each grain for long minutes until it dissolved like a breath. He slept in the open, through storm and frost, curled against the roots of trees, his robe no thicker than air. He held his breath until his vision blurred and his head rang with wind. His limbs withered. His skin clung to his bones like silk over stone. His hair fell in clumps, and birds perched near him, thinking him a branch. He listened only to silence. He welcomed pain. He thought it would purify him, but the fire of truth did not rise. He could silence the body. He could silence even the mind, but the ache remained. The ache that asked, why do we suffer? Why do we cling? What ends the endless turning of sorrow? One day, as he bathed in the river, he collapsed from weakness. The water barely reached his knees, yet his strength failed him. His vision dimmed, the world tilted. A young girl named Sujata saw him and, moved by compassion, offered him a bowl of rice milk. Her hands trembled as she knelt before him, unsure if he was a spirit or a dying man. The milk was warm, the grains soft. As it passed his lips, his body stirred, not with indulgence, but with remembrance. The body was not the enemy, nor was the world. In that moment, clarity dawned. This was not failure, this was insight. Neither indulgence in luxury, nor torment of the flesh had freed him. He had lived both extremes. He had walked both shores, and both had kept him bound. He would walk the middle way, not soft and yielding, nor rigid and cruel, not drowned in pleasure, nor crushed by pain, but steady, balanced, awake. He stood and walked back to the grove. The 5 ascetics saw the softness in his step, the colour in his cheeks, and they scorned him. He has abandoned the path, they whispered. He has turned back to comfort. But Siddhartha knew better. He did not argue. He did not explain. He simply bowed and walked on. At the edge of the forest stood a great fig tree whose roots plunged deep and whose branches reached like arms toward the sky. Siddhartha looked upon it and knew, here he would sit, here he would wait. He gathered dry grass for a seat. He placed his back to the tree. He crossed his legs, rested his hands in his lap, and drew a deep, even breath. He made a vow, though my skin withers, though my bones turn to dust, I will not rise from this seat until I find the end of suffering. The sun passed. The moon rose. Birds quieted. Winds stilled. And in the silence the battle began, not with sword or shield, but with doubt and memory, fear and illusion. But that was the next story. For now he sat, still, the seeker who had tasted every path, now ready to look within. The next chapter had begun. She had heard hundreds of stories, pain layered on pain, grief knotted with shame, rage disguised as silence. Dr. Anjali Mehta was a seasoned therapist, 47 years old, calm voice, warm eyes, a room filled with soft lamps, quiet bookshelves, and a single blue armchair that caught the afternoon light just so. She had learned over time that her work was not to fix people, but to witness them, to hold space, to wait, to not flinch when the truth arrived. That afternoon, her 2 p.m. client sat stiffly. Teenage boy, 17. Sleeves pulled over his hands, a stare that hovered somewhere behind her shoulder. He didn't speak for the first 8 minutes. She didn't force it. She just sat, breathing gently, grounded, present. When he finally did speak, it was one sentence. Everyone talks like they know what I'm feeling. They don't. She didn't nod too quickly, didn't say, I understand. Instead, she let silence do what words often can't. There's a saying in Zen, she offered softly, that the teacher is like a mirror. They don't speak for you. They just show you where the dust has gathered. The boy blinked, looked at her, and, for the first time in weeks, said something more. There is a deep wisdom in the pause, the moment between a question and an answer, the breath between emotion and reaction, the silence that honors pain without trying to patch it. Anjali once had a mentor who said, "You don't need the right words, you need the right presence." She had taken that to heart. Her patients didn't always thank her, didn't always improve quickly, but many came back. Because there aren't many places in the world where someone will sit with your brokenness without trying to sweep it away. She remembered an older woman once, widowed after 42 years. The woman cried for 45 minutes straight. Anjali didn't interrupt, didn't analyze, just handed her a tissue and stayed. At the end of the session, the woman whispered, "You're the only person who didn't tell me to be strong." Anjali said nothing, but later she wept, not from sadness, but from the honor of witnessing someone's unguarded truth. Therapists are trained to listen, but Anjali had learned to listen beneath the words, the tightening of a jaw, the hesitation before a name, the breath that catches after, "I'm fine." Sometimes her job wasn't to provide answers. It was to be the room where the storm could pass. She had a small bell on her desk, never rang it, just kept it there to remind herself, returned to this moment over and over. One evening, after a long day, she wrote in her journal, "People come in with tangled lives. I don't untangle them, I just hold the threads until they can begin to see the pattern. The boy in the blue hoodie came back the next week, and the next. He still didn't say much, but he sat and listened, and didn't flinch when she said his name. It was a start. And sometimes that is enough. With each breath, we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen, where the smallest stone may hold the greatest truth. Here starts the next story. In the town of Rajagaha, nestled among ridges of stone and mist, the streets curled like vines through hills and markets. Every morning, as the sun brushed gold across tiled rooftops, the air came alive with the calls of merchants, the ring of temple bells, and the mingling scents of tamarind, burning incense, and warm, sweet rice. Life here was orderly, rhythmic, a blend of mountain silence and city song. But lately, that rhythm had broken, not from plague, not from drought, but from something deeper, more primal. Fear, not fear of armies or kings, but of a creature, Nalagiri, a bull elephant so massive that earth seemed to lean under his step. Captured from the wild mountains of the north, Nalagiri had been kept in the royal stables since he was young. Once a proud spirit, free to roam cliffs and bathe in wild rivers, now he was shackled day after day, year after year. The weight of captivity grew inside him like fire trapped in stone. He grew restless, then bitter, then dangerous. Stable boys quit, guards were replaced, chains grew thicker. Nalagiri's cries echoed through the stone halls like thunder rolling through empty skies. The people of Rajagaha whispered that madness had taken him, but not all feared him. One man saw an opportunity in that rage. Devadatta, the Buddha's cousin, a monk by appearance, but a storm beneath the robes. Jealous of the Buddha's calm, his followers, his truth, Devadatta sought power, not peace. And when his teachings could not rival the Buddha's, he plotted instead. He went to King Ajatashatru, young and proud, his rule still soft around the edges, and he leaned close. "Let Nalagiri loose," he whispered. "Aim him at the Buddha. See what becomes of silent wisdom when tusks meet flesh." The king, tempted by spectacle or swayed by flattery, agreed. And so, one morning, before the city had fully woken, the iron gate to Nalagiri's pen creaked open. Chains were undone. Commands were given. The path was cleared. Nalagiri stepped forward, eyes wide, breath steaming, mind ablaze. He charged through market streets, through cloth stalls and fruit carts, scattering baskets and lives. People screamed, children ran, dogs howled and carts overturned. He did not walk. He tore the world open beneath him. And down that path, barefoot, cloaked in saffron robes, carrying only his arm's bowl, walked the Buddha. No guards, no weapons, no rush in his step, just presence. His disciples shouted from behind walls and corners, "Lord, turn back, the elephant comes, he will crush you." But the Buddha kept walking, not with recklessness, not with pride, but with compassion so still it could hold a mountain. As Nalagiri approached, the air thickened with heat and tension. His tusks gleamed, his trunk coiled like a whip. His roar shattered the morning hush. Mothers shielded their children. Merchants fell to the ground. The entire city held its breath. But the Buddha stood. The elephant thundered toward him. The ground trembled, and then stillness. The Buddha raised his eyes and looked. He looked not at a beast, not at a weapon, but at a being in pain. He saw the chains, the years, the sorrow turned to rage. He saw the hunger for freedom twisted into madness. He saw a heart once wild, now broken by cruelty. And in his gaze, he held no fear, no judgment, only recognition. As Nalagiri neared, mere strides away from trampling the man before him, he met that gaze, and something changed. The wind quieted, the air cooled. The fire in Nalagiri's eyes flickered. He slowed, then paused. His ears twitched, his breathing hitched. He took one more step, then stopped. The Buddha stepped forward. Slowly, gently, one hand raised, not to strike, not to shield, but to bless. And Nalagiri knelt. He folded his legs beneath him, lowered his head like a branch under rain. A great groan, half sigh, half sorrow, escaped his chest. And there, in the middle of the street where rage had once ruled, the Buddha placed his hand on Nalagiri's brow. Not with domination, but with presence. And the elephant wept. Tears pooled beneath his eyes, streaking down the folds of his face, darkening the dust. His trunk coiled softly around the Buddha's arm, no longer as a weapon, but as a gesture of surrender. The city watched in stunned silence. The same elephant who shattered stone fences and snapped trees now sat like a disciple at the feet of peace. Devadatta, watching from the shadows of a colonnade, said nothing. His plot, like a snake uncoiled, had slithered away, not with defeat by force, but by a truth too gentle to resist. Later, when the sun rose fully and the city slowly exhaled, Nalagiri returned to the royal grounds, but no longer was he led by whip or chain. He walked slowly, willingly, like a monk returning from alms. The Buddha returned to his seat beneath a banyan tree, his bowl untouched, his robe still bright. And the people came. They came not to celebrate a miracle, but to understand a lesson. They asked, "How did you stop him?" And the Buddha replied, "Anger cannot be conquered by anger, but by love alone. Fear cannot be silenced by force, but by understanding. The wildness in others is often the cry of suffering, not wickedness." And so it was taught that true strength is not in the fist, not in the sword, but in the heart that stays open in the face of danger. The tale of Nalagiri passed from lips to scrolls, from scrolls to temples, from temples to time itself. Children would ask their mothers, "Is it true that the Buddha tamed the elephant?" And they would answer, "Yes, my child, but not with magic, with seeing. Seeing the pain in others, seeing the fear beneath fury, seeing the being behind the mask, and meeting it with love." Nalagiri lived out his days not as a beast of burden, but as a gentle giant, offering rides to children, watering temple gardens with his trunk, and standing calmly when the monks recited sutras beneath the trees. It is said that when he died, the earth grieved gently, and his spirit rose unchained. Some believe Nalagiri was reborn in a heavenly realm. Others say he was reborn among the disciples. But all agree on this, that in the still gaze of one awakened man, an ocean of rage was calmed, not by war, but by peace itself. At the edge of a temple, near the foot of a quiet hill, there lay a stone basin. It had no inscription, no offerings placed before it, no tourists gathered around, but every monk in the monastery knew its story. And when a novice was struggling, that's where the teacher would send them. Go sit by the broken bowl, they'd say, and that was enough. Long ago, the bowl had been whole, carved from a single piece of granite, smooth, strong, revered. It stood in the center of the temple courtyard, used for rituals and alms. Every morning it was filled with clear water. Every evening it was emptied and washed. Then came a winter earthquake, not violent, but enough. A hairline fracture, then a second quake weeks later, and the bowl split down the middle, cracked clean through. It no longer held water. Some said to discard it. Others wanted to repair it. But the abbot, an old woman with kind eyes and a quiet presence, said, "Leave it as it is, let it teach." And so it remained. Years passed. Moss gathered inside the broken seam. Rain pooled only briefly before slipping through the gap. The bowl no longer functioned, but it was not discarded, because in stillness, it began to reveal something else. Monks would sit beside it, touch the cool edge, trace the break with reverent fingers, and slowly, quietly begin to understand. Wholeness does not mean unbroken. The world teaches us to fear breaking, to grieve what cannot be fixed, to measure our worth by our usefulness. But the Dharma invites a deeper seeing, a truth whispered by that silent stone. You are not what you hold. You are what you are. Even when you hold nothing at all. The broken bowl was no longer useful, but it was still itself, still stone, still shaped by care, still part of the temple. Its crack did not remove its belonging. One day, a monk sat beside it after losing his voice. He had been a teacher, a singer of chants. Now, silent, he felt useless, forgotten. Until the abbot brought him to the bowl and simply said, "It doesn't hold water, but it still holds truth." And then she bowed. This is the parable of function and form. So often, we confuse our value with our utility. We think, I can't do what I used to. I've lost my role. I am broken. But even a bowl that no longer holds water can still hold presence, still offer reflection, still rest in the sun, still teach. In Buddhism, there is a phrase, form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. It appears in the Heart Sutra, one of the most profound teachings. On the surface, it sounds like a riddle, but it points to this: what you are is not just your shape, and what breaks doesn't define what remains. Imagine your roles are bowls: parent, artist, teacher, helper, listener. When one cracks, you may feel like you've lost something essential, but you haven't lost you. You are still present, still capable of love, still part of the whole, just as the broken bowl is still part of the temple. One evening, a novice accidentally dropped a cup. It shattered. He looked up in fear, but the teacher only said, "It was already broken." The boy's eyes filled with confusion. The teacher continued, "Everything we use is already broken. We just don't see it yet. So we love it while we have it. And when it breaks, we bow. To live with this awareness is not to be gloomy. It is to be free, to care for things deeply, but not cling to them desperately. To understand that even in brokenness, there can be peace." Commentary. The broken bowl reminds us that identity is not function, that worth is not erased by loss, that something can be cracked and still belong, still matter, still offer presence. There is a time to serve, and there is a time to simply be, to be still, to be soft, to be a presence others can sit beside. Like the bowl, like the monk with no voice, like the abbot who teaches with silence. You are not just the things you do. You are not just the roles you fill. You are not just the tasks you complete. When those fall away, when something cracks, what's left? That's the real practice. That's the part of you that watches, that breathes, that remains. Sit beside your own cracked places, not to fix, but to witness. Let them speak. Let them soften you. Let them remind you that even broken things reflect the sky. Even a bowl that holds no water can hold the Dharma. He never spoke a word, not to the monks, not to the villagers, not even when invited to tea by the abbot himself. He simply bowed and walked and bowed again. They called him the silent pilgrim. He had no belongings except a small cloth bag and thick wooden sandals worn smooth from years on the road. His face was weathered by wind and sun. His back slightly bent, not from age, but from reverence. Because every third step, he stopped, placed his palms together, and bowed to the earth. Step, step, bow. Step, step, bow. He traveled like this for hundreds of miles, through rice paddies and dusty plains, through mountain passes and city streets, through cold rain, sharp sun, and falling snow. He never begged, never asked, never preached, only bowed. When he reached the gates of a remote temple high in the hills, a monk ran inside to announce, "The pilgrim has come." Curious, the monks gathered. Some stood with folded arms. Others watched from the steps. One scoffed, "What is this? A show?" Another whispered, "Surely he must be seeking merit or praise." But the abbot only smiled. "Wait. Watch." The pilgrim reached the stone path before the temple gate. Step, step, bow. His palms touched the gravel. His forehead met the earth. He rose slowly and continued. All morning he bowed up the path. By noon he had reached the courtyard. The air was silent, except for the soft crunch of gravel and the long breath between bows. Step, step, bow. By evening, he reached the base of the temple steps. He did not climb them. Instead, he bowed once more, then turned, and began his journey down the mountain. Step, step, bow. The monks were stunned. He never entered. He never asked to stay. He came all this way just to bow. The abbot nodded. And in bowing, he entered more deeply than any of us. This is the story of wordless devotion, of practice not performed, but lived in the marrow of each step. Commentary. In the West, we often think wisdom must be spoken. That truth arrives in grand lectures, eloquent teachings, powerful arguments. But sometimes the greatest teachings are silent. The silent pilgrim did not explain his path. He became it. With each bow, he gave himself to the moment, to humility, to gratitude, to presence. He bowed not to worship the earth, but to remember he belonged to it. In Buddhism, we bow not out of subservience. We bow to let go of the self, to surrender ego, to honor interbeing. The sky does not rise without the sun. The tree does not grow without the soil. You do not breathe without the generosity of everything around you. To bow is to remember that. The pilgrim didn't need a teacher. Every grain of dust was his teacher. Every blister, his scripture. Every bow, a verse in the sutra of the path. He asked for nothing, judged no one, corrected no teachings. He gave only his body, his time, his breath. That was his offering. That was his sermon. One monk, deeply moved, asked the abbot, "Should I walk like that? Bow like that?" The abbot said, "Not unless your heart is already bowing. It's not about copying the form. It's about sincerity. Some bow with their bodies and judge with their minds. Others bow with their actions and remain upright inside. But true bowing begins within. It is a quiet crumbling of pride, a surrender of the need to be seen, a softening into the now." There is a Zen phrase, "The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences." The silent pilgrim had no preference for praise or obscurity, for arrival or delay. His goal was not the temple. His goal was the bow itself. Step, step, bow. Again and again, until there was no one left doing it. Only the gesture, only the giving, only the way. Wherever you are, whoever you are, you can bow too, not just with your body, but with how you listen, with how you wait, how you serve, how you show up for the dust on the floor or the silence in a friend's eyes. To bow is to soften, to slow, to remember what matters, and sometimes to say everything without a single word. The path of Zen unfolds like morning mist, soft and patient. In this next tale, we are invited to see, beyond appearance, into essence. Listen carefully to the next story. She was just the cleaning woman. That's what most called her. Not nun, not practitioner, not devotee, just the woman who swept the temple. She arrived before sunrise, her hair tied back in a grey knot, her robes plain and faded, her broom worn thin at the bristles. She did not chant, did not preach, did not study sutras in the main hall. She swept the stone walkways, the meditation hall. The steps no one noticed were dusty until they were clean. And when she swept, she smiled. Some of the younger monks whispered, "She's not really practicing. She doesn't even sit in the morning zazen. She just does chores." But she never responded. She bowed to them anyway. Years passed. One by one, the monks left for higher temples, deeper study, more advanced masters. But she remained, still sweeping, still silent, still smiling. One spring morning, the abbot called for an assembly. The monks gathered, some sitting in strict posture, others blinking away sleep. The abbot raised his voice gently. "I have been observing this temple for many years," he said. "And in all this time, only one among you has reached the heart of the Dharma." Heads turned. The scholars straightened their backs. The meditation leaders adjusted their robes. The younger monks held their breath. And then the abbot looked to her, the woman with the broom. She was in the corner, brushing dust from the edge of a wooden beam. She paused, looked up, and smiled. A silence fell over the room. Then whispers. But she never studied the Diamond Sutra. She never debates koans. She doesn't even recite the Heart Sutra. The abbot turned to them and said, "She lives it." This is the story of embodied wisdom, the kind that doesn't speak loudly, but moves like breath through a humble act. Commentary. There is a great misunderstanding in spiritual life, that awakening comes only through texts, or teachers, or temples. But the Buddha taught in forests. He sat beneath trees. He pointed to rivers and mountains and empty bowls. He said, "The way is not in the sky, the way is in the heart." The woman who swept the temple did not need to talk about mindfulness. She was mindfulness. Every stroke of her broom was deliberate, every step a prayer, every breath a chant. She did not perform her devotion, she lived it. You can memorize every scripture and still miss the truth. You can quote the sutras and still live with bitterness. But you cannot sweep the floor with love for 30 years and not be changed. The Dharma is not performance. It is not approval. It is presence. Many monks seek truth like a prize. They strive. They compare. They seek recognition. But the woman who swept the temple had no audience, no ambition, only a broom, a path, and her attention. That is enough. That is more than enough. There's a Zen saying, "Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water." Because the truth doesn't take you away from the world. It brings you deeper into it. It makes you pay attention. To dust in corners, to the sound of your own breath, to how gently you place a bowl on the table. We live in a time of noise, of opinions, of spectacle, of credentials. But the Dharma whispers, sweep, breathe, smile, and mean it. That is enough. So wherever you are, whether folding laundry, washing dishes, answering emails, tying your child's shoes, do it with all of you. Do it like the woman who swept the temple, and let the dust be your teacher too. There was once a kingdom where wisdom was prized like gold. Rulers held council with monks. Children learned not only how to count, but how to think. And among its most respected voices was a wandering teacher known simply as the Buddha. He did not wear jewels, he did not shout, but when he spoke, even the birds seemed to pause. And one day, in the town square of a village nestled near the banks of the Ganges, he told a story. Not to entertain, but to reveal. The dispute began with laughter, then sharp words. A group of scholars, each confident in his own tradition, had come to debate. Some were Brahmins, others were ascetics. A few belonged to newer sects, filled with fiery conviction and scrolls still smelling of fresh ink. They spoke of truth, of soul, of self, of afterlife, of permanence, of nothingness. Each man insisted his view was the whole, complete, correct. The others, misguided, foolish, dangerous. They argued beneath a fig tree, loud enough that passers-by turned to look. A merchant chuckled, a potter shook his head, a child pointed and whispered, "They sound like crows fighting over the same grain." When the Buddha arrived, he did not interrupt. He simply sat and waited until their voices began to falter, some from exhaustion, some from shame. And into that space, he placed his voice like a drop of water on a still pond. "There was once a king," the Buddha began, "who summoned 6 men born blind since birth." The scholars fell quiet. The king told them, "I will allow you to encounter something magnificent. Tell me what it is." The blind men were curious, eager. They were led one by one to a massive animal they had never known, a mighty elephant. Each man was guided to touch a different part. The first reached out and felt the flank. He pressed his palms against its broad, warm side and declared, "Ah, an elephant is like a wall, wide and unmoving." The second grasped the tusk, smooth and curved like polished stone. "No, no," he said. "An elephant is like a spear, sharp and strong." The third took hold of the trunk, which coiled and shifted in his arms. "You're both wrong. It is like a snake, alive, twisting, breathing." The fourth felt the knee, round and solid. "Clearly, it is like a tree trunk," he announced, "thick and rooted." The fifth wrapped his hands around the ear, which flapped gently like a fan. "You are mistaken. An elephant is a large fan, waving back and forth." The last man touched the tail, thin and rope-like. No, it's a rope. A coarse, swaying rope." When they were brought back together, the king asked, "Well, what is an elephant?" And the shouting began. Each man insisted he was right. Each accused the others of ignorance. Each swore he had touched the truth with his own hands. And in a way, they had. The Buddha paused. The scholars sat frozen, the parable hanging in the air like incense smoke. "Each man," he said, "encountered only a part. Each was sincere, each described what he felt, and yet none saw the whole." He looked at each scholar now, gently, without judgment. "So it is with many truths. You may touch a piece and call it the whole, but when clinging to fragments, conflict follows." One of the younger scholars frowned. "But teacher," he said slowly, "does that mean there is no truth?" The Buddha smiled, not to mock, but to soften. "Number, it means that truth is vast, and the mind must be vast to hold it. One who sees the trunk and believes it is a snake is not lying, but he is also not seeing clearly." Another monk, one who had remained quiet through the debate, bowed. "And what, Blessed One, is the way to see the whole?" The Buddha turned his palm upward, a gesture of openness. "Humility, listening, letting go of the need to be right. When you stop clinging to your peace, you make space for someone else's. And in that space, something greater may arise." The fig tree rustled gently above them. A breeze passed through the square. The tension had broken. One of the elders leaned forward. His voice was softer now. "I have spent my life defending what I thought was the whole elephant, but now I wonder if I have only touched the tail." The Buddha nodded. then you are further along the path than many who still cling to the tusk. That night, as lamps flickered in the homes of the village, the story traveled from mouth to mouth. Children reenacted the blind men, bumping into trees and miming trunks and tails. Elders sat in circles, wondering what part they had touched in their own lives, what truths they had guarded too tightly. And in one small home, a young girl asked her grandmother, "What does the whole elephant look like?" The old woman smiled. "We may never know for sure," she said. "But if we all share what we felt, maybe we can come closer." And so, the parable of the blind men and the elephant was passed on, not as a warning against belief, but as an invitation to perspective, to listen, to learn, to let go of the walls we build around our understanding. Centuries later, the story would still be told, in temples, in schools, in circles of debate and doubt. And always, it would whisper the same truth. No one sees everything, but together we can see more. It is said that after his awakening under the Bodhi tree, the Buddha sat in silence, not because he had nothing to say, but because no words could contain what he saw. The world shimmered before him like a dew-covered web catching the morning light. Everything, every leaf, every breath, every thought was connected, not metaphorically, not poetically, but truly. And so, in that first silent gaze, the Avatamsaka Sutra was born, not as speech, but as vision, a vast, radiant vision of interbeing. Imagine this: a net stretches across the cosmos, infinite in all directions. At each knot of the net, there is a jewel, and in each jewel, the entire net is reflected. Every other jewel, every other reflection. No part is separate. No jewel exists on its own. This is Indra's net, one of the core images in the Avatamsaka Sutra. It is not a fantasy. It is how reality is structured. Everything contains everything. You are a jewel in the net. So is the ant beneath your foot. So is the person you haven't forgiven. So is the star pulsing light from 10 billion years ago. Each one reflects all, and when one moves, all are changed. This is not romanticism. It is truth seen from beyond the ego. In the Avatamsaka, it is said that a single moment of insight can contain the entire Dharma, and a single grain of sand can reveal all Buddhas, because nothing is just itself. A drop of water is also the cloud, the river, the ocean, the drought, the cry of thirst, the hand that turns on the tap. All these are not separate events. They are expressions of one great dance. There's a story told from the sutra. The Bodhisattva Sudhana travels in search of awakening. He visits 52 teachers. Each one shows him a different truth. A sailor, a child, a gardener, a courtesan, a beggar, a monk. Not one has the final answer, because in this vision there is no final answer. There is only deepening, broadening, the ever-widening ripple of understanding that you are not apart from anything, not even from the question. In the end, Sudhana meets Samantabhadra, who tells him, the path is infinite, the practice is the vision is you. And in that moment, Sudhana realizes he was never seeking something out there. He was walking through his own reflection. If you truly see this just once, you can never hate again in the same way. Because to harm another is to harm yourself. To lift another is to lift all. You do not have to understand the whole net. You only have to touch one jewel, a single act of kindness, a single moment of stillness, a single breath where you choose love over fear. That one act changes everything, because the net responds, because you are not alone, because no wave rises by itself. Commentary. The Avatamsaka Sutra is sometimes called the flower ornament scripture, because it reveals the beauty of reality as it is, not flat, not linear, but multidimensional, like a lotus unfolding endlessly in every direction. In our daily lives, we feel separate. I am here, you are there, this is mine, that is yours. But this is illusion. A necessary illusion perhaps, but illusion nonetheless. Reality is interpenetration. You are in me, I am in you. Even now, reading these words, your breath carries the oxygen once exhaled by trees that died 1,000 years ago. Your thoughts are shaped by your grandmother's voice, by books written by strangers, by the laughter of a friend you no longer speak to. Even your loneliness is shared, because someone else right now feels it too. This is not meant to overwhelm you. It is meant to free you, because when you understand interconnection, you do not have to do everything. You only have to do something, and trust that it matters. Because it does, because the net responds. A Zen teacher once said, "When a bird sings on one branch, the whole forest awakens." You may be that bird, you may be the branch, or the silence that follows. Each one is essential. Each one reflects the whole. You are not small, you are a jewel in the net, reflecting everything, and being reflected by everything. So polish your jewel, not for glory, but for others, because the clearer you become, the clearer the whole web shines. In the hush of understanding, Zen offers us another glimpse of what it means to recognize worth not by weight or shine, but by presence. Here starts the next story. In a quiet village nestled between two rivers, a potter lived alone. He was known not for his words, but for his hands. They shaped the earth with kindness. They moved with rhythm, like a prayer. And every morning before the sun rose, he would mold the same thing, small clay lamps, hundreds of them. He did not sell them, he did not sign them. He left them at doorsteps before dawn, filled with oil, a simple wick resting inside. By evening, the lamps would flicker to life, soft amber lights glowing in windows and shrines, guiding travelers, warming meals, lighting prayers. And no one knew where they came from, only that they came quietly. One day, a monk came to the village. He had heard of this lamp ghost and was curious. He waited outside a hut, said to belong to the potter, and watched the sun rise. Sure enough, the door creaked open. A thin man stepped out, carrying a worn wooden tray of unbaked lamps. He didn't see the monk at first, so the monk bowed and said gently, "Friend, why do you do this?" The potter paused. He looked down at the lamps, then up at the sky just beginning to lighten, and replied, "Because one day I won't be here, but maybe the light will." This is the story of karma and legacy, how what we give quietly endures beyond our body. Commentary. Many people worry about what will remain of them. They build statues, they write books, they name buildings after themselves. But the deepest echoes are often unmarked, like a clay lamp on a doorstep, lit by someone you never met, burning because of your offering. The potter never asked who lit the lamps, never watched them flicker at dusk, never demanded thanks. He just shaped the earth, filled it with light, and left it for the world to use. This is karma in its most graceful form. Not reward, not punishment, but continuation. The Buddha once said, "Just as a candle lights another and can light thousands, so the light of one heart can illuminate countless others." We are clay, yes, but we are also the fire. And when this form ends, what burns inside us doesn't disappear. It moves on through kindness passed on, through wisdom shared, through care planted in another's path. The potter died in the winter of his 79th year. He died quietly at home, his hands still stained with red earth. When villagers found him, his workshop was filled with unbaked lamps, dozens of them, lined up like soldiers of light, waiting for dawn. They were fired in his honor and distributed across the village. But something strange began to happen. Even after the lamps ran out, more began to appear. Not always the same shape, not always the same clay, but always filled with oil and always left before sunrise. Because a child who had once lit one of his lamps remembered the warmth and made one, then another, then taught a neighbor, and the fire moved on. This is rebirth, not in form, but in impact. You do not need to be remembered, you only need to leave light behind. So ask yourself, what lamps are you shaping? What small lights are you leaving in the world? Not to be praised, but to be used. Because one day, your body will rest. But your lamp may still burn in a window you never saw. He sat beneath the Bodhi tree, its roots like arms cradling the earth, its leaves trembling in the hush before dawn. Siddhartha was still, not because he had nothing left to do, but because he had found the one thing worth doing. The grass beneath him held the warmth of day's memory. The river nearby whispered its ancient lullaby. Above, stars thinned into morning. And within him, the silence grew deep. He had made his vow to remain unmoved until he had reached the end of suffering. And so he breathed, in, outside. The body sat like a mountain. The mind watched like the sky. But truth, before it flowers, is always tested, and so came Mara. Mara, the tempter, the king of illusion, the force of resistance in all beings who inch toward awakening. He did not come in one form, but many, not with a single sword, but with 1,000 voices. First, Mara sent desire. His daughters appeared, radiant and swaying. Their forms shimmered with beauty. Their voices sang sweet lullabies of longing and delight. They danced before the still figure under the tree, their laughter like bells. But Siddhartha did not stir. Their beauty held no hook. His gaze did not linger. He saw not bodies, but masks, not pleasure, but impermanence. Desire passed like perfume on the wind. Then Mara sent fear. The sky darkened, thunder cracked, demons emerged from shadows, fangs bared, eyes aflame, weapons of fire and bone in hand. They rushed the tree, screamed into Siddhartha's ears, hurled spears of doubt and arrows of terror. But Siddhartha did not flinch. The weapons turned to lotus petals as they neared him. The demons screamed, but their voices died in the vast silence that surrounded him. Fear had no place where nothing was clung to. Next came pride. Mara appeared himself, seated atop a colossal elephant, cloaked in glory. He laughed with disdain. "Who do you think you are?" he asked. "A prince playing holy man. What gives you the right to seek truth? You are alone, no teacher, no witness." Siddhartha looked up, calm and clear. He reached his right hand to touch the earth. And the earth responded. It is said that in that moment, the earth itself bore witness. The ground trembled gently. A breeze swept through the grove. The Bodhi tree's leaves shimmered like stars. The earth, vast and ancient, acknowledged Siddhartha's right to awaken. Mara's elephant stumbled. His illusions cracked. His army scattered like dust in wind. The tempter vanished, and all was still again. But the night was not yet over. With Mara gone, Siddhartha turned inward, deeper than ever before. He saw his past lives, hundreds, thousands, as farmer and king, as bird and beggar, as woman, child, beast, each life carrying joy and sorrow, birth and death. He saw the law of karma, how intentions shaped outcomes, how cruelty echoed, how kindness grew roots across lifetimes. He saw the chain of suffering, ignorance giving rise to craving, craving to clinging, clinging to becoming, becoming to birth, birth to decay and death. He saw that to break the chain, one must see clearly and let go. The dawn approached. The sky shifted from indigo to pale rose. Birds stirred in branches. The river shimmered. And in the first light of that new day, Siddhartha saw it, not as concept, not as hope, but as direct knowing. He saw the four noble truths, that suffering exists, that it arises from craving, that it can end, and that there is a path to its end. He saw the eightfold path unfolding before him like stepping stones across a great river. He saw suffering, and he saw its end. And in that moment, as the sun broke the horizon and the world breathed anew, Siddhartha became the Buddha, the awakened one. He opened his eyes, and the dew on every leaf sparkled with the same truth. Mara had been defeated, not with sword, not with spell, but with stillness, with clarity, with the earth itself as witness. The man who had walked away from gold and pleasure, who had starved beside the river, who had sat unmoved through storm and illusion, had now touched the infinite. And he smiled, not with triumph, but with compassion, because now he would teach, and the world would begin to wake. High in the hills above a quiet town there stood a temple. Its walls were weathered by wind and time, its steps worn smooth by generations of sandals, its prayer flags faded but still fluttering, and in its tallest tower hung a bell. Massive, bronze, perfectly cast. It had been gifted by a distant king centuries ago, carried up the mountain by oxen and monks, polished each year, respected, admired, but never rung, not once. The bell had a name, Resonance of the Mountain. Inscribed around its rim were words in a forgotten tongue. It was said to hold the most beautiful sound ever forged, so pure, so deep, that it would quiet all suffering for a moment. But no one had ever heard it, because the abbot long ago had made a vow: let the bell only ring when the world is ready to listen. And so it waited and waited. Pilgrims climbed the hill just to see it. Children dared each other to touch the rope, but none pulled. It became a symbol of restraint, of mystery, of potential, and eventually of silence too deep to question. One day, a novice asked the elder monk, "Why don't we ring it?" The monk shrugged. Because it was meant to be rung, but never was. The novice frowned. Then what's the point of its sound? The monk looked out at the horizon and replied, "You tell me." The story of the bell spread like smoke, and in time, people began to wonder how many other bells go unrung, not made of bronze, but of possibility. There was a painter who never showed her art, a musician who kept every song in his notebook, a teacher who knew how to heal but doubted her voice, a young man who wrote letters he never sent, a woman who forgave but never said the words aloud. Each of them had a bell hanging in the tower of their own life, polished, admired, imagined, but never heard. This is the parable of unused potential. The Dharma teaches us about impermanence, yes, but also about urgency, not frantic urgency, but gentle, clear truth. This life will not wait forever, and the sound in you deserves to be shared. The bell was never rung, not because it couldn't be, but because someone was waiting for perfect conditions, for absolute certainty, for a sign. But life rarely gives signs, only moments, and you must choose to meet them. There is a Zen story of a man who stands beside a river. He thirsts, but waits for the perfect reflection to appear on the surface before drinking. He dies with water at his feet. What sound do you carry within you? What truth, what offering, what kindness left unsaid, what creation unwritten, what forgiveness unopened? Letting your bell ring does not require a crowd. It doesn't need approval. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be true and shared. One evening, a new abbot arrived at the temple. She had studied the bell's history, had bowed to it many times. And then, one spring morning, as the valley bloomed, she climbed the tower and pulled the rope. The sound that followed was not loud, not shocking, but profound. It rolled through the mountains like a low tide, clear, mournful, joyful, full. Birds rose into the air. Monks paused mid-step. Villagers lifted their heads from bowls and windows. And in that moment, everything was still. Not because they heard something new, but because they heard something they had always carried inside. Then the bell was silent again. But something had changed. The abbot later said, "A bell is not meant to be perfect. It is meant to be heard. And so are we." Commentary. This parable asks a quiet but urgent question. What are you holding back? Not out of wisdom, but out of fear. The sound in you may not end suffering. It may not change the world, but it may change a moment. It may reach one person. It may free your own breath, and that is enough. We often wait for permission, for clarity, for mastery, for the right time. But the bell does not ask, "Will I be understood?" It asks, Will I be true? The world is filled with unwritten books, unsung songs, unspoken love, unrung bells, and it is not failure to stay silent, but it is loss of what could have been shared, loss of what someone else needed to hear, even if only once. You don't have to shout. You don't have to perform. You just have to let your voice exist, to let the truth you carry move from silence into air. So ring your bell, tell your story, share your art, speak your heart, forgive, laugh, cry, begin again. Even if your voice shakes, even if your hands tremble, even if no one claps, let the sound live outside of you. Let it ripple. Let it go. Because a silent bell may be beautiful, but only a ringing bell is alive. As the lantern of awareness glows a little brighter, we come to a tale about seeing with more than the eyes. Let the stillness guide you now, and listen carefully to the next story.